Chapter 1807. Xiao Chen responded again. Oh my god, why do I feel like I'm dreaming? Jing Yu looked at Xiao Chen in shock. Xiao Chen chuckled when he heard Jing Yu's words. He reached out and hugged Jing Yu in his arms. He closed his eyes and said, "Don't think about it. Dream again and you'll give birth to the child." Jing Yu didn't know whether to laugh or cry when she heard Xiao Chen's words. She poked Xiao Chen's chest and buried her head in Xiao Chen's
Chapter
arms.
1817.
She sighed and said,
The poison
"Time
in
Feng
flies.
Maching's body
In the
is
blink
just
of an
an
eye,
ordinary
the
poison.
three of us are married."
However, the one who poisoned Feng
Xiao Chen
Maching
hugged
is
Jing Yu
obviously
tightly
not
and
the
said,
same person
"Do you have
as the
any
one who injured him.
unfulfilled wishes?"
Those wounds
Of
are
course
obviously
it's to go to the
caused by
Roman
people from
forest.
Jianghu. Jing Yu got
Feng
angry
Ling
when she said
slightly
this.
pursed her lips and
She
said,
reached out
"Now
and grabbed
Feng
Xiao
Maching
Chen's
is
face.
fine.
She
She
should wake
stared
up
at tomorrow.
Xiao Chen fiercely and said,
Feng Ling,
"Speaking
have
of
you
which,
received
I
any
haven't
news
settled
recently?
the score with you
Have
yet.
people from Yaojiang
Are you going
sneaked
to
into the
return Silver
mainland?"
Arrow and
Jing
Silver
Yu
Wind to
slightly
me or
pursed her
not?
lips and looked at
You
Feng
even
Ling
said
and
that
asked,
Silver Arrow
"I
and
haven't
Silver
heard
Wind
any
were in
news
the palace."
recently. You
Feng
liar.
Ling shook her
Jing
head
Yu said
seriously
angrily
and pulled
"It
Xiao
seems that the
Chen's
people
face
from
fiercely.
Yaojiang must have taken some other way
Xiao
to get
Chen
in.
sucked in a breath
The
of cold
ability of
air
our
and
dark
quickly
insect
restrained
is not
Jing
as
Yu's
good
hand.
as that of the
He said,
Constellation Palace.
"You're pregnant now.
We have to ask
I can't
Su
let
Yu for
you be
help
with Silver Arrow
Well,
and Silver
let
Wind.
Su Yu find
What
out
if
what's
these
going
two
on
big
with the
guys
people
bump
from
into you?"
Yaojiang."
Jing
Where
Yu
am I
slowly
Silver
nodded
Arrow
and
and
agreed.
Silver Wind?
The person who
Jing
poisoned
Yu
him
stared
doesn't
at
seem
Xiao
to be
Chen
someone
angrily
with a
and
high
said
status.
through gritted teeth,
The
"They're
poison
in the
is
forest.
very simple.
You didn't bring
Maybe
them
it
back,
was just an
did you?"
accident that he met Feng
Ahem,
Maching.
Feng Ling
Xiao
said.
Chen coughed
"I hope
slightly
it
and
was
said
an accident.
seriously, "This is
Jing
a
Yu didn't
serious
think
matter."
so. We'll
She
talk
just
about
said
it
this
later.
sentence faintly and then sat silently
Jing
to the
Yu
side.
instantly went berserk.
Did you encounter
She
anything
glared
else along the
fiercely
way?
at Xiao Chen and
Xiao
opened
Chen
her
turned
mouth
to look
to
at
bite
Feng
his
Ling
hand.
and asked.
This person
It went
had
well.
obviously tricked her
Feng
into
Ling
coming back.
slightly nodded and
If she
said,
didn't give
"But I
birth to
learned
the
that
child,
Suyu was
he
near
wouldn't
the
let her go
imperial
into the
city of
forest.
Tokyo, so
Jing
I sent
Yu
her a
knew that
message
Xiao Chen
directly.
did it for her own
I
good,
guess she will
but
arrive
Jing Yu
in 2
still
days.
felt very angry
When
for
she
a moment.
arrives, we will
Her
find
eyes
out
were
what's
full
going
of
on with
ferocity,
Yaojiang.
and she chased after
Well,
Xiao
it
Chen like
saves
a
us a
wolf
lot
cub.
of trouble.
She seemed to have
Xiao
made
Chen
a lot of
slowly
noise
nodded
on the
and then
bed for a
talked
long
about the
time.
people from Yaojiang
Summer was
and
a little
Feng
irritable.
Maching's injuries.
Jing Yu's stomach was
Maching
getting
didn't
bigger
wake up,
and bigger
so
day by
everyone
day.
was just guessing.
In the imperial
So they
city,
didn't say much.
the matters of the
They waited
imperial
until
court
Feng
were
Maching
gradually
woke up
fading
and then
away.
made plans.
Shangguan
Late at
Linglin's
night,
wedding was
Hellion
over,
chased
and
away the
August
night
was
watchman
coming.
as usual
The Wang
and
Fu
walked
was
to
getting
Feng
more and
Maching's
more
bed.
lively. Looking at Feng
Sister-in-law,
Maching's rosy
do you
face,
understand
he
these accounts?
slowly heaved a sigh
Jing
of
Yu's
relief.
belly was
He
almost
sat down by
5
the
months
bed and
old,
looked at
and it
Feng
was very
Maching.
obvious.
He was so
These
handsome,
days,
but
he
he
was at home
disguised
talking
himself
to
as a
Feng
woman
Ju about the
when
matters of the
Hellion Theo
restaurant.
first saw him.
Occasionally,
He was
when she was
disgusted,
free,
Jing
but
Yu would
what
take
happened
Feng
later?
Ju to the restaurant,
Why didn't she hate him
tailor
after
shop,
that?
and other
Perhaps
places
it was
to
because
learn
he
and
had a
see
good
how these
relationship with
businesses
Jing
were
Yu.
run. So he was
Shen
always
Yuqing,
polite to
Lu
him.
Man,
And
even
the
when
others
he was
all
really
knew that
angry,
Jing Yu wouldn't
he never
always be
seemed to
here.
get angry.
After knowing
Later
that Feng
on,
Ju
when he
was
was
so
Jing Yu's
angry that he
sister-in-law,
hit and scolded
everyone
him,
was very
he was still
respectful to
laughing
Feng
and
Ju.
joking.
Hellion
Hellion Theo
understand.
couldn't get
Look
rid
at
of him
how they
no
didn't
matter
give
what
in
he
to
did.
each other when they
What
met.
made Hellion
There was a
Theo
faint
even
shook her head
angrier
and
was
his
that
eyes
this
as he
person
said,
was
she turned her
obviously
head
a man
and
continued
continued
to
to
watch
watch
the
the
situation
situation
in
in
a
the
such
room.
an interesting
Just
way.
as everyone was
during
waiting
this period of
outside,
time,
the closed
what happened
door
after
finally
that,
opened.
and
It was
realized
probably
that there
because
were so
Hellion
many
Theo
things that I didn't
suddenly
know
felt
that this
Hellion
person
Theo
didn't
insisted
seem to
to
me
me
as
how
disgusting
making
as
fun of me.
before.
Jing Yu
Jing
took a
Yu
step
probably
forward
because
because
of his
and took
humble
a sip of
sip
warm
he
water
didn't know
before
whether to
talk
laugh
outside
compared
or
to
cry.
Uncle
The
Shem
Xiao
and
Chen
Sister Man
responded,
and
"What I
led
know
everyone
is
to the
just
living room
superficial.
before sitting
However,
down.
if there's
The
anything that I
imperial
don't
palace was
understand in the
huge,
future,
but he
just
couldn't
ask."
keep it. He could still vaguely remember the scene
Chapter
of that day.
1808.
On the roof,
I will.
he drank to his heart's
Feng Ju
content
nodded
while
slowly.
facing the stars
Jing
in the
Yu
sky.
and Feng Ju
Under
were
the
talking
starry
in the
sky,
room when they suddenly
his
heard
deep
a
eyes were
series of
filled with
hurried
passion,
footsteps,
and it shocked
Jing
him
Yu turned
fiercely.
her head and saw
At that
15th
moment,
interrogation
an
running
irresistible
in with a
feeling of
panicked
disgust
face.
and rejection
What's going
surged
on?
in his heart.
Jing
He
Yu
almost
saw
went
this scene
crazy and
widened
cursed him
her eyes
fiercely.
in shock.
Even
She
after
looked
so
at
long,
15th interrogation
Hellion Theo
and asked,
still remembered
"Why
that
are
at that
you so
moment,
flustered?"
Feng Maching's face was
Brothel
full
Master
of astonishment,
Feng was injured by
and
someone.
those eyes that were a
Boss
little
brought her
bit
back.
silent.
15th
In the end, he saw
interrogation's
him
face
leave
was
with a
slightly
laugh.
pale as he
He
said,
thought that he would
Master
never
asked
see him
Tamed
again
to
in
go
this
over.
life.
Who
Jing
knew that
knew
fate
from
was so
15th
funny?
interrogation's reaction that something big must have happened.
She
Chapter
immediately looked at
18.
Feng Zhu and
Helen
hurried
Theo
to the side
leaned
yard.
against the bed
In this small
absentmindedly.
yard,
Everyone
he
was
sat
here.
at the end of the bed
Jing
and
Yu
quietly
quickened her
looked
pace
at Feng
and walked
watching.
over with Feng
This
Zhu's
face
help.
had entered his mind at
Xiaochen,
some
what
point in
happened?
time.
Jing Yu
For
frowned
countless
and
days and
asked.
nights,
Helian Theo
here.
had not thought of
Xiaochen saw
Jing
Jing Yu's
but
arrival and turned to look.
Helian Theo pursed his lips
was
tightly
standing
and
beside
suppressed
Xiaochen.
the strange
His
discomfort
face
in
was
his heart.
so ugly that
He
it was
turned
scary.
around to get water.
What's going
Just
on?
like he did every night,
Jing
he
Yu
wrung the
frowned
towel
slightly.
dry and wiped
She had just
Feng
approached
Maching's
the room
face
when
bit
she
by bit.
smelled the scent
Then
of fresh
he moved
blood.
down,
Jing
Just
Yu
as he
frowned
reached out to
deeply and
untie
turned to look
Feng
inside
Maching's
the room.
clothes,
His
on the
wrist
bed
was
in the
suddenly
room,
grabbed
there was
by
a
hand.
figure lying on it.
Helly and Theo's
The ground
hand
was
trembled
covered in
violently,
gauze,
the
and there were
towel in his
basins
hand
of blood.
slipped and landed
Jing
on
Yu
Feng
frowned when
Maching's
she saw
chest.
this scene,
Helly
and
and
her
Theo
eyes were
raised his
filled
head
with
in solemn
shock and saw
surprise.
Feng Maching's
What's
open
going
eyes.
on?
There was
Jing
a
Yu
faint
frowned
calmness
and
in
turned
his
to the
eyes.
side.
Xing
When
Yi
did you
was
wake
gritting
up?
his teeth.
Helly and
Blood
Theo
was
forced
flowing out
himself
from
to
his
calm
wrist.
down.
Jing
He
Yu
looked at
clearly
Feng
saw that
Maching's
the blood
hand
was
and
red when it
hurriedly
first
reached out to
flowed
break
out.
free.
However, when it flowed to
Feng
the
Maching
floor,
held on
it
tightly
slowly
and did
turned
not
black.
let go.
Feng Maching.
Jing Yu
Let
saw
go.
this scene and
Helly and
instantly
Theo's
sucked in a breath
expression
of
turned
cold
ugly
air.
bit by bit.
What kind of poison
Just as
was
he was
this?
about to speak again,
What happened?
Feng Maching let go
Jing
of his
Yu
hand
frowned deeply at the
expressionlessly.
scene.
Then
This
he
is goo
slowly
poison.
closed his eyes
Xiao
as
Chen
if the
turned to
person
Jing
who
Yu
had
and
just
said,
opened his
"Feng
eyes was
Maching
just
is
an illusion."
unconscious
And Xing
I want
Yi
to
doesn't
see
know
Xiao
anything.
Chen.
He only
Feng
dragged
Maching's
Feng Maching
throat
back
moved
and got
slightly
poisoned.
before he spat
Luckily,
out a very
the
hoarse
poison
sentence.
wasn't deep, and
After
he was
Feng
fine
Maching
after the
let
blood
go
was
of
released.
Helly and
Theo's hand. He
poison.
stood up and took a deep breath.
When Jing Yu heard
He
this
turned
term
around
again,
and walked
the
out of
first
the room.
person that came to mind
His
was
heart
Madame
could
Ye.
not be suppressed
Wasn't
no
she
matter
Xiao
how
Chen's
hard he
sister?
tried.
Xiao
The
Chen
news
never
of
mentioned
Feng
this
Maching
matter,
waking up
and Jing Yu
alarmed
never
Xiao
looked
Chen
into it.
and Jing Yu.
Back then,
The two
Xiao
who were
Chen
sleeping
Madame
soundly
Ye
got
with his
up.
own hands.
Jing Yu wanted
Jing
to go
Yu
with
saw
Xiao
it with
Chen,
her own
but
eyes.
Xiao Chen did not
Wasn't
agree no
Madame
matter
Ye
what.
dead?
Where did
Jing Yu
this
had
goo
no
poison
choice
come
but to
from?
listen and stay in the room
Where
to
did
wait
Xing
for
Yi
Xiao
find
Chen to
Feng
return.
Maching?
Xiao
Jing
Chen
Yu
returned
returned
to
to
Xing
not
Yi
long
and
after.
asked.
Jing Yu was in
Outside
the
the
room
northern
looking forward
suburbs.
to Xiao Chen's
Xing
return.
Yi's face was
When she
also
saw
pale.
Xiao Chen return,
He pursed
she
his
quickly
lips
got out of
tightly
bed and greeted
this
him.
subordinate
She
went out
reached
to
out to
handle
help
some
Xiao
matters.
Chen take off his
On the
coat
way
and
back,
asked, "This
"What's the
subordinate
situation
saw Manor Lord
outside?"
Feng lying in the
Feng
bushes
Maching
covered
is
in
fine.
blood. So
Now
I brought
that
him
he's
back.
awake,
He just needs
Didn't
to
you see
recuperate."
anyone in the
Xiao Chen
surroundings?
pursed his lips
Didn't you
slightly
leave
and
anything
said,
behind?
"As for the injuries
Jing
on
Yu
his
asked
body,
with a deep
he was
frown.
injured by an enemy."
Xing Yi slowly
didn't
shook
pay
his head.
attention to it at the moment.
Clearly,
Xiao Chen must have
then
asked
what's
about
the
this
deal
long
with the
ago.
goo poison?
Now,
Jing
it
Yu
looked like they
frowned
could
and
only
asked
wait
again.
until Feng Maching
the
woke
key.
up to find out what
Xiao
was going
Chen
on.
said very quietly.
Why would goo
Feng
poison
Maching
appear
said that he
in the
met a girl
Imperial
who
City
asked for directions.
Jing Yu pursed her
However,
lips tightly
the girl was
and looked
wearing
at
a
Xiao
veil
Chen
and
he couldn't
uneasily.
see her face
She
clearly.
asked,
Could it
she
be
asked
that
for the
Madame
location
Ye's
of the
subordinates
rich-cum
are still
restaurant.
hiding in the
And then?
Imperial City? Jing Yu frowned slightly. She
Chapter
reached out to put the
1809.
robe on the screen and continued
Xiao Chen
to ask.
slowly shook his head.
Feng Maching knew
Ninth
and
Royal
naturally
Uncle,
pointed the
this
way.
young master's
However,
injury has
not
been
long
stopped.
after he pointed
His
the way,
life is
he
not
met
in
an
danger
enemy.
for the time being,
With Feng
but the
Maching's
poison
ability,
in his body
he shouldn't
is
have been
still
injured,
spreading.
but he was
If the
suddenly
poison in his
poisoned.
body is not removed within 10
If he
days,
hadn't used
the
the last
poison
of
in
his
his
strength
body
to
will
escape
spread to
and
his
hit Xing
internal
Yi,
organs.
he would have probably
When
died.
that time comes,
Xiao Chen's
even the
eyes
gods
were
will be
filled with
powerless
coldness
to do anything.
Jing Yu
The
immediately
imperial physician
frowned after
bowed
hearing
deeply to
Xiao
Xiao
Chen's
Chen.
words. His tightly knitted
the
brows
problem lies
caused
with
the
the girl who
expressions
asked
of
for
everyone in the
directions.
room to turn
Why
ugly.
did she choose Feng Maching?
Third Xing,
Send
send
a
a
message
message
to
to
Feng
Feng
Ling.
puzzled. Have
I
him
don't know.
quickly come to the
Xiao Chen
Tokyo
shook his head
Imperial
slowly
City.
and said,
Xiao
Feng
Chen turned his
Maching has
head
just
and
woken
said
up,
Third
and his
Xing.
body is still
Only then
very
did he
weak.
turn his head
Let
to
him
ask
have a good
the
rest.
Imperial physician
It won't
about
be
the
too late to
situation.
ask him tomorrow.
He ordered
It's
people
good
to
to know
tidy
that
up the
Feng
room
Maching
and went
is
out of the
fine
living
after
room.
waking up.
With the current situation, there's nothing we can do. Xiao
Chapter
Chen sat down on a
1819.
chair in the living room.
Jing
He
Yu nodded
pursed his lips
slowly
slightly
in
and
response.
said,
The
Feng
next
Ling
morning,
comes from
Jing
Yao
Yu
and Xiao Chen
Perhaps
got up
Feng
and went to
Ling will
Feng
have a
Maching's
solution
courtyard
for the matter of
They
the goo
saw Helly
poison.
and Theo standing
We'll have to
outside
wait
the door.
until
Feng
Why
Maching
are you
wakes up
standing
before
here?
we know what
Why
happened.
aren't you going in?
Xiao Chen's tone
Jing
was
Yu
raised
grave.
her eyebrows and
Why
looked
did
at Helly
Feng
and
Maching
Theo
leave
leave
the
the city
city
alone.
I'm about to
Or
go
did
in.
he go to the
Helly
northern
and Theo
suburbs?
was stunned when he saw
Jing Yu was very
and Xiao Chen.
confused.
She
Jing
didn't
Yu
know
looked at
why,
Helly and
but
Theo
Feng
and found it
Maching's
strange.
serious injuries
She
and the
raised
sudden
her
appearance
eyebrows
of the
and
goo
went in
poison
first.
gave Jing Yu a
Helly and
very
Theo
strange
followed
feeling.
Jing Yu and Xiao
It
Chen
seemed
in.
that this
The
piece
guards
that was
in the
hard hard to come by was about to be broken.
Medicine.
Jing Yu sighed deeply.
Finished the
She
medicine
placed her
in
hand
big
on her
gulps
stomach
without even frowning.
The uneasiness
He
in
nodded
her
slightly
heart
when he
grew
saw
bit by
Jing
bit.
Yu and Xiao Chen
seemed to feel
How is
uneasy.
it? Do you feel
He reached
better?
out to hold Jing
Jing
Yu's
Yu
other
walked
hand.
to the side and
When
sat
he turned
down.
his head,
She
his
looked at
pitch-black
phone-watching
eyes
and
were
asked,
filled with darkness.
Much better.
My
fine.
inner strength is
Jing Yu
recovering
knew
bit
that
by
Xiao
bit.
Chen was worried about her.
Feng nodded
She shook her
slowly.
head slightly
After
and
that,
smiled
Jing
faintly
Lang
at
and
Xiao Chen,
interrogation
indicating
officer
that
one
Xiao
arrived
Chen
as
didn't
well.
need to worry.
Feng Ling
After
looked
the
at
imperial
Feng
physician
Maching
and
and
nodded in
everyone in the
satisfaction,
room also
saying,
retreated.
This medicine is
Xiao
still
Chen
useful.
arranged for Xing
The
Yi to
poison
stay
in your
in the
body
room
has
next
been
door.
cleansed.
Although Xing
Feng
Yi
Yu,
wasn't
who was
injured,
at the side,
his body was
blinked
weak.
slightly as
He
she
should
looked at
rest well
Feng
for the
Maching.
next few days
Uncle
and
Feng,
see if the goop
you're
poison
still
was
much
removed.
more pleasing to the
Xiao
eye.
Chen,
I
Feng Yu
wanted to
said
ask you
seriously.
before. Who are you
What's the
calling
matter
uncle?
with this Madame Ye?
Feng
From
Maching's
Yaojiang.
face darkened.
Jing Yu
He
and
gritted
Xiao
his
Chen
teeth
had
and
also
glared
returned
at
to their
Feng Yu.
own courtyard.
My big brother
Jing
Ling
Yu
saved
held
you.
it in for so
Don't
long.
think of repaying
She couldn't help but
kindness
ask.
with ingratitude.
She's my foster
As
mother's
Feng Yu
daughter.
spoke,
She hid behind Feng Ling and bared her teeth at Feng Maching. After a moment of silence, he said calmly, "You like this? My biological mother passed away when I was young. Don't be rude. My adoptive mother raised me, Ling glared but I never thought that she was a woman from Miaojiang. Immediately became obedient. Foster mother? The goo poison in Miaojiang is actually so powerful. Jing Yu was instantly dumbfounded by Xiao Chen's tangled relationship. She looked at Xiao Chen with a puzzled expression after meeting the girl who asked for directions. Xiao Chen shook his head slightly and sat silently at the side. Feng Maching nodded slowly. It seemed like he was thinking about how to tell Jing Yu, young lady but also seemed like he didn't know how to say a single word. Jing Yu sat quietly beside Xiao Chen and wasn't in a hurry to ask. At that time, I was walking on the street. My foster mother had ill intentions towards me, left and right, so I killed her. Then walked up to me and asked if there was a very novel restaurant in the imperial city called Xiao Chen. You have spat out this sentence. She asked me where this restaurant was. It was just this short sentence. At that time, I said, carry a huge amount of information. I happened to know the owner of that sitting at the side, so I gave this misdirections. What do you mean by having ill intentions? And then said that I know the owner of this restaurant. Pale lips. I said yes, and then she smiled and said that she really reached out to hold Xiao Chen's hand. After that, however, she found that Xiao Chen's walked in the direction I pointed. I don't want to talk about these disgusting things in my life. Everyone in the room looked at each other. Felt Jing Yu approaching. There didn't seem to be anything strange. He turned to look at Jing Yu and said, Jing Yu sat every at the time I think about these things, I feel that. What's wrong? I'm very dirty. Is there something wrong? Chapter 18 looked at Jing Yu's expression and raised his eyebrows slightly. Jing Yu suddenly grasped Xiao Chen's hand tightly. Jing Yu stood up and reached out to pull Xiao Chen into her embrace. That something was wrong. Her golden green eyes sparkled as she said, asked again, "Don't talk about it anymore. Didn't you see that girl's face? Don't think about it anymore. I didn't see it. I don't want to know." Feng shook his head slowly. She locked me in a room as if he thought of something. He suddenly said, watched from the side. But this girl's accent sounded like a local, and there was a scar on her wrist. Xiao Chen's entire body was frighteningly cold. The words that came out of Xiao Chen's mouth made Jing Yu feel as if she had fallen into an ice cellar. Because I didn't take a closer look. Don't talk about it anymore. I'm just curious. Jing Yu reached out to cover Xiao Chen's mouth. So how could she not know where to imagine what Xiao Chen, who was only 6 years old, had experienced? Jing Yu frowned deeply as if she was thinking about something. No one was born looked at Jing Yu and began to ponder. There was a rumor about the 9th emperor. Jing Yu suddenly said, it said that anyone who met the 9th emperor would die. Owner of the restaurant. Perhaps this was the reason why Xiao Chen was resisting. Was slightly stunned and asked. It was because of what happened back then that cast a shadow for directions is probably a pretense. Xiao Chen looked at Jing Yu's slightly moist eyes and reached out to take her hand. No matter what the reason was, his pitch black eyes definitely didn't want to poison you before you said with the trembling owner of the restaurant. He asked. But after you said you knew her, do you hate me? She poisoned you. Jing Yu said in a deep voice through her tears. That's why she said she reached out to hug Xiao Chen and said, "She really asked the right that person. I didn't appear by your side with her lips tightly Otherwise, I would have torn those people to shreds. Could this girl be targeting you?" That disgusting woman actually did that to a child like Xiao Chen. He looked at Jing Yu with a frown and said in a deep voice, "Jing Yu's hand that hugged Xiao Chen tightened. Why did she find you through the woman's daughter, Nie Yunqian? I don't know." Jing Yu deeply shook her head slowly. Her eyes filled with coldness. But there were definitely remnants of power in Miaojiang. If the truth was as Jing Yu said, Jing Yu was still thinking about Xiao Chen's words. Although he didn't know what her motive was, silent when Xiao Chen mentioned Madame Ye. She didn't come with good intentions. Xiao Chen never talked about someone to investigate this matter. It was probably because Xiao Chen didn't want to touch on this dark past. Rest well and recover from your injuries. With her thoughts in a daze. If you think of anything else, but not long after remember to tell me immediately. She heard the trembling of the people around her. Feng Maching nodded woke her up from her dream in an instant. Maching's slightly tired appearance and stood up to leave so that Feng Maching could covered in sweat, Jing Yu was still haunted by a terrible nightmare. Who is this girl who asked for directions? Don't come over. A local? Don't. She had an injury on her wrist. Spat out these words. Jing Yu really didn't remember. Hurriedly pushed Xiao Chen and called out anxiously. Moreover, she was someone who knew goo poison. Hurry and wake up. It was really too strange. Xiao Chen and his men busied themselves while the imperial physician came to diagnose Jing Yu. Xiao Chen abruptly confirming that there was nothing wrong with Jing Yu. His pitch-black eyes were filled with monstrous murderous intent. On the third day after Jing Yu had never seen Xiao Chen with such an expression, who had received the news, her heart trembled violently. At the same time, she paled as she clutched her chest. Very valuable piece of news. Xiao Chen was truly too frightening. Did your people see a lot of people entering Miaojiang? Did you have a nightmare? Come to the mainland? Jing Yu reached out to touch Xiao Chen's hand. As she turned to look at Feng Ling, she realized that Xiao Chen's palm was covered in cold sweat. Yes, a lot of people from Miaojiang Jing Yu and heard Jing Yu's their posture. They didn't seem to have good intentions. Of relief. So I sent people to follow him. He lifted his hand to wipe away the cold sweat on his forehead. The people from Miaojiang were extremely cunning. He slowly sat up and asked in a hoarse voice, and then disappeared. Did I wake you up? I don't know where they escaped to. Chapter
Su Yu
18
said
solemnly. Don't worry,
However,
I'll
I
get you
tracked
some
down
water.
one of them.
Jing Yu stood up and poured a cup of cold
from the
water
direction
for Xiao Chen
of
to
this
drink,
Tokyo.
suppressing
It was
the
a man with a
uneasiness
scar
in her
on his
heart.
face.
Jing Yu
His
took out a
appearance wasn't
handkerchief
very
and
clear,
gently wiped
but if
the
I
sweat
see him
off
again,
Xiao Chen's
I will be
forehead.
able to
She
recognize
looked
him at a
deeply at
glance.
Xiao Chen and asked,
Su Yu said
"How are
with a
you
frown.
feeling? Are
A
you
man?
feeling better? Not a woman?
I'm fine."
Jing Yu was slightly
Xiao
stunned
Chen
and
closed
asked,
his eyes tiredly
"Yes,
and said,
a man.
I just
Su
dreamed of
Yu
something
nodded
I
slowly,
didn't want to dream of.
looking at Jing Yu's
It's
strange
fine.
expression.
It was just
she
a dream.
suddenly asked in confusion,
Jing Yu seemed to know
"What's
what
wrong?
Xiao Chen dreamed
Is
of.
there a problem?" She silently reached
It's
out
nothing.
and gently caressed
Jing
Xiao
Yu
Chen's
slowly
face
shook
and
her
said,
head.
"I'm here.
Since the
It's
people
fine."
from Yaojiang came
When
in
Xiao
this
Chen heard
direction,
Jing Yu's
there
words,
must be a
he
problem.
raised his head slightly
Jing Yu
and saw
frowned
the
deeply
faint
and turned to
smile
look
on
at
Jing
Su's
Yu's
face.
I will have
He
to
helped
trouble
Jing
you to
Yu's
help me
hand
keep an
and lay
eye
down
on
on
what
the
the
bed
people
again.
from Yaojiang
He
want to
reached
do.
out and hugged Jing Yu in his arms.
Only then did he feel his flustered
Chapter
heart slowly
18:21.
calm down. I
The night was
understand.
not peaceful,
So
so
Jing
Jing
Yu
Yu
slowly
slept until
then
late
asked,
in the morning
"How
the
is
next
Feng
day.
Maching now?"
She propped herself
"Is there
up
anything
and got
wrong
up.
with him?" Yin Xiao
With
and
Feng
Lian Man
Ling here,
helped Jing Yu
he's
get
still
dressed.
alive and well.
Where Xiao
Jing
Chen?
Yu nodded calmly
Jing
and
Yu
said,
looked at Yin
I'm going
Xiao,
to look for
who was
Xiao
combing
Chen.
her hair in the mirror,
Feng Maching
and
is
asked
in the
with
side
her head
courtyard.
lowered.
You can
The
go and
ninth
see him.
emperors went out early in the morning.
Su Yu
This
nodded in
servant doesn't know
response
where
to
the
Jing
ninth
Yu's
emperors
words.
went.
Yin
Then
Xiao
she got
replied.
up and walked
When
towards
Jing
the
Yu
side
heard Yin
courtyard
Xiao's
under the
words,
lead of
she
the
raised her
maidservant.
eyebrows
This was the
slightly
first
and
time
didn't ask
Su
any
Yu
more
came to the
questions.
prince's mansion.
Where did Xiao Chen
Looking
go
at the
early
scenery
in the
morning,
mansion?
Jing
Jing
Yu
Yu
looked
tidied
around
up
a little and
curiously.
ate some food.
She had been in
Then,
the pugilistic
she walked
world
to the
for a
side
long time
courtyard
and
to
met
visit
many
Feng
people who
Maching.
always wanted
When
to
she
come to
walked
the
into the
imperial
courtyard,
city and
she
look at
saw
the scenery
Xing Yi
in the
and
imperial
Xing Er
city.
talking.
Now, Su
Madam,
Yu suddenly seemed to
Xing Yi
understand.
and Xing Er
This
stood up
imperial
when they
city
saw Jing
really
Yu.
made people linger
Xing Er?
and forget to return.
Why are you here instead of
Su Yu
staying
narrowed
in the
her
general's
eyes
residence
slightly and turned to walk
Jing
towards
Yu
the side
stepped forward
corridor
and stood beside
However,
the two of them.
the moment she walked,
She asked
she met
curiously,
an unexpected
"I heard
person.
that something happened
The
to
man
boss.
in black
So
walked
I
over
came
with
to
a
see if
white
there's
bandage
anything I
wrapped
can
around
help
his
with."
wrist. There was
Xing
no
Er looked at
expression on
Jing
his
Yu
face
and
as he
frowned
walked
slightly.
over casually.
He said solemnly,
With a glance, he
"Weren't
saw
the people
Su
from
Yu and Su
Yaojiang
Yu
chased
also
away?
saw him.
Why
Who
is there
else
still
could walk
poison?
around casually in the
I don't
prince's
know about
mansion
this
other
either.
than Xing Yi?
I'm sending someone
Su
to
Yu stood in
investigate."
place and was slightly
Jing Yu
stunned.
gestured for Xing
Her
Yi
eyes
and
were
Xing
dyed
Er
with
to
a
sit
layer
down.
of another color,
Then she
as
turned
if
to
she
look
was
at Xing
afraid.
Yi and asked,
She
"Are
lowered
you
her
feeling
head
better
slightly,
today?"
as if she
"Do you
wanted to
feel any
avoid him.
discomfort?"
However,
This
thank
was
you for
only
your
a
concern,
corridor.
madam.
She
This
couldn't avoid him
is
even if
fine.
she wanted to.
Xing Yi bowed
Xing
and
Yi
said,
stopped in his tracks.
It's good that you're fine.
Su Yu also
I'll go
stopped.
check on Feng Maching. I'm here to
You
see
guys
Feng
chat
Maching.
first.
After
Su Yu
Jing
was
Yu
silent for a
casually
moment,
asked a few
then she
questions,
tilted
she
her
turned
head
to the
and
room
said,
on the other side.
Xing
Yi
Yi
looked
looked
at
at the
Su
room
Yu and
Feng
waved
Maching
slightly
was
to the
still
maidservant
unconscious.
beside him. The manservant
turned and
standing
said,
by the bed
"I'll
was
take you
guarding
there."
him. When he
No
saw
need,
Jing Yu's
there's
arrival,
someone.
he hurriedly
Su
bowed.
Yu wanted to say that
No
there
need
was
to be
someone
so
who would take her
courteous.
there,
But
How
in the
is
blink of
Feng
an
Maching?
eye, she saw
Jing
that
Yu
the person
asked
who
with
was
a wave of her
originally
hand.
leading the way
He's
turned
still
and left.
unconscious.
Su Yu
We can't
opened her
even
mouth
feed
to
him
call
medicine.
out, but the maidservant walked
If it
even
wasn't
faster.
for Emperor Hulian's help,
Su Yu
we
suddenly
wouldn't have
became
been able to
anxious
feed
and
him the
glared
medicine.
at Xing, the servant
Who
said
else
with
could
a
make this
conflicted
maidservant
expression.
so obedient
Hellion
except
Theo?
for Xing Yi?
He's still here?
Let's go.
Jing Yu was
Xing Yi
slightly
didn't say
stunned
much
when she heard
turned
the servant's
around
words
and walked forward.
A few days
Although
ago,
Su
he was
Yu
still
didn't want to
fighting
leave,
with Feng
the
Maching.
Wang Fu was so
Jing Yu
big and
thought
she
that
wasn't
Hellion
familiar
Theo
with it.
was the happiest
It wasn't
to see
good for her
Feng
to
Maching
wander
injured.
around.
That's
In
right.
desperation,
Emperor
she could
Hellion
only
stayed by
follow
brothel
Xing Yi's
Master Feng's
footsteps.
bed all night.
With Xing Yi
This
leading the
lowly
way,
one didn't
Su
know
Yu
that the
suddenly
two of them
lost
had
all
such a
interest
good
in the
relationship.
exquisiteness of the
The
Wang Fu.
servant nodded seriously.
She silently followed
After
behind
he finished
Xing Yi
speaking
and looked at
Xing
Xing
Yi's
Yi's tall
expression
body
became
and his
even
black
more
robe as
strange.
usual.
Good
Looking at the
relationship?
black robe,
Su Yu suddenly fell into a
Chapter
trance.
18:12.
In the past,
How is
Xing
that
Yi's
possible?
clothes were not only
Jing Yu
black.
glanced at the
At
servant.
that time,
Just
Xing
as
Yi
she
was
was in
about to
Jianghu,
question him again,
he was so
she saw
handsome and
Hellion
confident.
Theo walking
But
in
now,
with
the medicine.
He had become so
She
rigid,
was stunned and
wearing
raised her
black
hand
clothes
to dismiss
he was
the
so
servant.
unapproachable.
Helly and Theo was also
really didn't
surprised to see
understand.
Jingyu. Then he walked to the
Was it
table
so
with the medicine
easy to
in
be
his
a shadow
hand
guard?
and put it down.
He could give up
Helly
everything
and
in the
Theo,
Jianghu
you
and
didn't
live a
brew this
carefree
medicine
and carefree
yourself,
life,
right? But now
Jingyu
he had
looked
to
at
serve
Helly
someone
and
else.
Theo strangely
It was
and
hard
asked,
to understand.
I had nothing to
Su
do
Yu
anyway.
slightly lowered her head.
When Helly and Theo
Her
said
eyes
this,
suddenly fell
even
on
Helly and Theo
Xingyu's
felt
wrist.
guilty,
The
let
white
alone
gauze was
Jingyu.
somewhat dazzling.
Don't be funny.
Su Yu frowned
Jingyu
slightly.
sneered and
She
looked at
saw
Helly
a little
and Theo.
blood oozing out
A
of
few days
Xingyu's
ago,
wrist.
you chased
After
after
a moment of
Feng Maching
silence,
and wanted to
she
beat him to
suddenly
death.
opened her mouth and
After
said,
all,
"Are
Feng
you
Maching was
injured?
drunk and molested
I'm
you.
fine." Now
Xingyu
you're
heard
taking
Su
care
Yu's
of him
words
so
and hid his
calmly?
hand in his sleeve.
Helly and
He
Theo,
didn't seem to
it
have
will make
much
me
of an
think the wrong
expression.
way.
But when Su Yu
Jingyu's
saw
golden green
interrogation
eyes stared
officer
at Helly
one's
and
action,
Theo.
she frowned
When she
in
saw Jingyu's
dissatisfaction.
lowered eyes,
She quickly
she
took a
became
few
even
steps
more
forward
curious
and grabbed
as if she had
interrogation
discovered
officer
something
one's
interesting.
hand.
She
The
pulled up
medicine is
interrogation
cold.
officer
Helly
one
and
sleeve.
Shio did not say
Looking
anything.
at the blood that
He
seeped
reached out and walked
Su
towards
Yu was
Feng
angry.
marching with the medicine.
He reached out and helped Feng marching up. He
Chapter
raised his hand and
1822.
pinched Feng
The
Marching's
wound
chin.
split open.
As he rubbed
Did you
Feng
practice
Marching's
swordsmanship?
chest, he poured the medicinal
Su Yu
soup
looked up
down
at
his
Xing
throat
Yi and said
very
very
looked at the
unhappily.
scene and blinked her eyes in
Interrogation
amusement.
officer one
Looking
looked
at
at Su
Helly and
Yu's hand
Xiao's
that was holding
appearance,
his.
she always
That
felt
gaze
a
filled
sense
with
of anger when
curiosity.
she looked up at him
Her
was
slightly
so familiar.
curved eyebrows made
Once
Hellion,
upon a time,
who was at
he
the
would
side,
always see
feel
such
as
a
if he
gaze
was
from
sitting
her
on
when he was
pins and
injured.
needles.
He didn't expect
Let's go
to see it
outside.
again after
Helly
such a
and
long
Theo
time.
called for someone to watch
You're
over
injured
Feng
and you
marching
still
and
practice
walked
swordsmanship.
outside. Don't you
Feng
want your
Marching
hand?
was chased out of the
Su Yu
imperial
said with
city
a
by
cold
me.
face.
Helly
Where
and
is
Xiao
the
sat
medicine?
down on a stone
Go
chair
and
at the
change the
side and
dressing.
said, "It was
It's
me
in
who
front."
chased him time and
Xing
time
Yi
again."
raised his hand
He had
and
no
pointed
choice
in a
but to leave
direction.
the city because
Su
he had
Yu
nowhere
glared
to
at
hide.
Xing Yi angrily
If I
and
didn't
dragged
chase him,
Xing Yi
he
toward
wouldn't
the
have
courtyard.
left the city and
Her
wouldn't have
mouth was
suffered
full of
such heavy
displeasure,
injuries.
and she was very unhappy as
I
she
can't let
rambled
him
on.
die.
Xing
Helly
Yi
and Theo
silently
said
followed
coldly.
behind Su Yu
Jing
and
Yu
let
looked at
Su Yu
Feng
pull his
Marching.
hand.
Feng
His
Marching's
heart was
face
beating
was
fast.
still as stunning
For
as
some
when she
reason,
first met him.
Xing Yi suddenly
However,
thought that it
there
would
was
be
a
good if
deeper
this
meaning
road
in
could
his
never
eyes.
be finished.
Jing Yu
But it
looked
was
at
just a
Helly and
thought.
Xiao and frowned
Sit
slightly.
here and don't move.
Although Helly and
Su
Xiao
Yu
said that,
pushed Xing Yi into the
felt
room
that it
and
wasn't
turned to
just
get the
that.
medicine box.
He won't die.
Xing Yi sat in his
Jing Yu
seat and
straightened her
smiled
body
slightly
slightly
at
and
Su
said
Yu's
very
movements.
calmly,
Then
"When
he seemed to
Feng
think
Ling
of
comes,
something and his
Feng
face
Marching
was
will be
slightly
cured."
silent.
Yes.
Su Yu took the
Helly
medicine
and
and
Xiao
gauze and
nodded
came
slightly
over.
in response.
She sat down
After
beside
sitting
Xing
for a
Yi
while,
and reached
Jing
out
Yu
to
got up and
untie the
left.
blood-stained gauze.
When she stepped out of the
Looking
courtyard,
at the cracked
Helly and
wound,
Theo
she
turned
turned
his head
fiercely.
slightly.
The wound
Helly
on
and
his
Theo
wrist
was still
didn't
sitting
look
like
like
it was
it was caused by
courtyard.
someone. There didn't seem to be any
what did
other
you do to
emotions
yourself?
in his calm eyes. Su Yu's eyes
Helly and
were full
Theo
of
had
shock.
changed.
Looking
He
at the
became
bloody
very
wound,
quiet.
she looked up at
Helly
Xing
and
Yi
Theo
and
wasn't
said,
like this when she
"I
first
didn't do
met Helly
anything."
and Theo.
Interrogation
Jing Yu
officer one
slowly
answered
turned
in
and walked
silence.
away.
Then
She
what
returned to
happened
her
to the
courtyard
wound?
to rest.
Su Yu
Xiaochen
frowned
only
tightly.
returned in the
Don't
afternoon.
tell me that you accidentally cut
When
yourself.
Jing Yu asked, Su
Xiaochen
Yu
only
squinted
said
at
that he
Xing
went
Yi
to the
and said,
northern
"You
suburbs to
cut
see if there
yourself.
were any
Do you want to
suspicious
die?"
signs. However,
Xing Yi,
he didn't find
when
anything.
did you become so
Feng Ling
cowardly?
will be here in 5 or
I'm
6
cowardly?
days.
We
Xing
can
Yi
only
heard
wait
Su
now.
Yu's description and
Xiaochen
suddenly
picked up the
frowned
tea on the
fiercely.
table and took a sip.
Su Yu, you can't possibly
Jing Yu
be
nodded
thinking
and
that
didn't
this
say
injury of
anything
mine
else.
is because of
Just
you,
as the two
that I
of them
didn't
were
want to live
resting,
anymore
they
and
heard
slid my
news
wrist
from
to
the front
commit
hall.
suicide. Xing
Right?
San stood in front of Jing
Interrogation
Yu and
officer
Xiao
one
Chen and
slowly
said,
moved
"Master,
closer to Su
Madam,
Yu and said
young
with
Master
slightly
Feng has
narrowed
returned.
eyes,
He is waiting in the front
Su Yu
hall."
looked
at Xing Yi's approach and swallowed silently and
Chapter
said,
1813.
"I didn't say anything. The
You
Feng
are
family?"
really?
Jing
Xing
Yu
Yu
looked at
was
Su Yu
slightly
taken
taken
aback when she
The
heard
two
that.
were so
She
close
didn't
that
come
they
back
seemed
to
to
her
be able to
senses
feel
for
each
a
other's
moment.
breath.
Feng
Su Yu
Zicheng
felt uncomfortable
Jing
all
Yu
over.
asked in surprise.
She tilted her head
Yes.
slightly and wanted
Third
to avoid
Xing nodded
Xing Yi
slowly
when he got up.
Feng
But
Zicheng
Xing Yi
back.
pressed her down on the soft
Didn't he
couch.
travel the world?
The wound on her wrist
Feng
split open
Zicheng had
again
left
and
long
long
ago
ago
when
when
they were in
flowed
Jinling.
onto Su Yu's
It had been
hand.
so long,
Su
but there
Yu's
was
eyes
no
were
news
full of
of
shock.
him.
She
She
reached out
that
and
the
pushed
next time
Xing
they
Yi,
met would be a
wanting to
long
remind
time
Xing
later.
Yi.
But
She
the
didn't
moment
know
she
where they
opened her
would meet
mouth
again.
Xing Yi
She didn't
leaned over
expect
and
Feng
kissed her
Zicheng
fiercely.
to return to Tokyo
Su Yu's
Imperial
eyes
City.
widened. Grand Secretary Feng had retired and
She
returned
wanted
to
to
his
struggle
hometown.
but didn't dare to.
Feng Zicheng didn't
Thinking
have
of
any
Xing Yi's
relatives in
hand,
the capital.
if she struggled,
he would definitely
Let's go
hold
and
her
take a
even
look.
tighter.
Blood
Xiaochen was
flowing,
only surprised
and the
for a
scorching
moment.
kiss had an
Then
aura
he
of
stood up
facing
and
death
walked
towards
with
the front
equanimity.
hall.
It was
The
a
moment
kind
he
of
stepped
silent
into the front
lingering.
hall,
He saw
Su
a
Yu was
man
kissed
in a light
until she
gray
was dizzy.
robe. Under
His
heavy
back was
breathing,
facing everyone,
Xing Yi
and he
slowly
was
straightened
curiously
his body.
studying the murals
His
on the
pair
wall.
of dark eyes
The man
stared
seemed to
deeply
have
at
heard
Su
the
Yu.
commotion behind
What do you
him.
mean by this?
He was slightly taken
Su Yu
aback
looked at
before
Xing
he
Yi.
turned around.
The emotions in her
That familiar
pair of
face
beautiful
had a
eyes
slight
were so
smile on it.
scary. It was still like a fox, but the pair of eyes that looked at him seemed
seemed to have become
Chapter
much clearer.
1823.
Ninth Emperor's,
Can't you feel it?
Ninth Imperial
Xing looked
concubine,
deeply at Su
long
Yu
time
and
no
slowly
see.
let go of Su Yu.
How have you been?
Then he stood
Fang
up,
Zicheng
raised
bowed
his
politely.
hand to take the gauze
Jing
and
Yu
medicine
looked
at
at
the
Fang
side
Zicheng
and was
strode
slightly
out.
stunned.
Su
The
Yu
Fang
lay on the
Zicheng
soft
in her
couch in
memory
a daze.
seemed to be like this,
Xing
but it
Yi's
also
blood on
didn't
her
seem
hand
like
had
this.
coagulated.
His originally
Only then
fair
did Su
face
Yu
seemed to
slowly
be
get
tanned,
up,
and his
her
body
whole
seemed to
body
be
was
much
emitting
taller.
an
It
indescribable
also seemed
anger.
like Fang
In
Zicheng
the
had
end,
always
she
been like
suppressed
this,
this anger
but it
deeply,
also didn't seem
stood
like
up,
this.
took the gauze at the
Jing Yu
side,
couldn't help but
and
laugh.
wiped the blood off
She
her
raised
hand.
her eyebrows
She
slightly
stepped out
and
of the room
smiled
and
at
looked
Fang
around.
Zicheng.
Just
Welcome
as she was
back.
about to walk
Fang
outside,
Zicheng's
she
eyes
suddenly
were
saw
full
the
of servant
servant
who was
when he heard
walking
Jing
past.
Yu's words.
She quickly
After
stopped
not
the
seeing her
servant
for
and
so
asked
long,
where Feng
there was a
Maching lived.
sense of shyness
When she learned
and
that it was on
alienation.
the other side of the
Finally,
room, after a
Su Yu
few
hurriedly
words, he
walked
felt
over.
much more comfortable
Feng
and
Maching,
sat in the
you're
hall
not
to
dead
talk.
yet?
It's
Su
been so
Yu
long.
unceremoniously
Where have you been?
entered the room, But the moment she entered, she was immediately dumbfounded Fang Zicheng before asking. Feng Maching was lying on the bed in his underwear. His hand was holding Helly and Theo's hand, and thousands of worlds was lying on his body. This position was incomparably ambiguous no matter from which angle and encountered many things. Theo, are you only then did I know how big the world is? Su Yu stood looking silently for a while really and said like someone who has traveled far away. I originally wanted to kill him, smiled faintly but now that you found out, then why did you come back? Still do it? Mother is seriously ill, so I came back between red and white. I just came back from my hometown. He reached out and pushed Mother's body marching away fiercely, so I came to the capital coldly and turned to leave. Fang Zicheng arched his eyebrows and said, was extremely I just didn't ugly. Expect so many After watching Helly and Theo leave, his gaze fell on Su Yu. Jing Yu replied, what are you doing here? Since you're here to visit, didn't know what was wrong with him, a few more days. His tone was terrible. Xiaochen said, it's been a long time since I last played in the Imperial City. Couldn't take it anymore. She looked if there have been any changes in the Imperial City. If it weren't for me, you would have exactly what I was thinking. Theo just now. Fang Zicheng this lady came to see you with good intentions. When the servant girl was about to bring Fang Zicheng to the guest room, you didn't come earlier or later, but you came with some confusion. Feng Maching on my way into the city said, I seem to have seen the Prime Minister's second daughter. You're still so annoying. I know that she was brought back. I'm relieved. Fang Zicheng looked at Jing Yu and nodded lightly. What? She looked at Feng Maching and said, Fang Zicheng's words. Some news. She opened her eyes wide and shocked. The person who injured you is from the Wind Lightning sect, an old friend of yours. Chapter narrowed her eyes and said, I didn't go forward to confirm. Leader of the Wind Lightning sect saw her seems to like you a lot. That's right, it's Jing Yan. Feng Maching immediately pursed his lips and said, his eyes were filled with displeasure. I can't recognize people. Where is he? Furthermore, there's no need to doubt it. Jing Yan from the Imperial City towards the Imperial City. When Jing Yu heard this, casually shrugged and said, frowned. I can almost see turned around and looked at Xiaochen. The mansion will be turned upside down. In each other's eyes. I don't know if Xiaochen will throw you out. I thought that she was already dead. You don't have to worry about that. I didn't expect her to still be alive. Feng Maching closed his eyes slightly and appeared in front of everyone. How shocking. You're really annoying. Jing Yu pursed her lips and said coldly with disdain. I will send someone to investigate this matter. She turned and walked outside. Frowned and said in a low voice. Jing Yu and Xiaochen were resting in the room. Jing Yu walked around the room but couldn't fall asleep. Just as she was engrossed in the study room, she heard the commotion in the room was very stuffy. She immediately Xiao to help her out for a walk. Xiao hurriedly the weather in August was still hot. On outside? Jing Yu walked on the small path with a cloak draped over her shoulders. And Miss Feng Yu pursed her lips and was lost in thought. Xiao's eyes were filled with anxiety as she said, but the night breeze made Jing Yu feel much more comfortable. Thinking about what Fang Zicheng said today, she didn't know why but she couldn't stop when they see each other. Just as Jing Yu was lost in thought, when suddenly saw her figure outside. He smiled and said, Fang Zicheng, who had changed into a white robe, knows his limits and won't hurt Feng Yu. When he saw Jing Yu from afar, win against he seemed to be surprised. You're really for a moment before walking in front of Jing Yu. Glared at Xiaochen. He bowed slightly and said, the ninth imperial concubine is also out for a walk. You've been reading for so long. Go inside and have a good rest. Then, she curled her lips and asked when she saw Xiaochen's nonchalant attitude. However, she was still worried and asked Xiao to keep an eye on the situation. When if anything happened, she would immediately report to him. Taken aback. Then, she was dragged to bed by Xiaochen. When Jing Yu heard Fang Zicheng's words, she couldn't help but fighting. Her eyes were cold as she turned around and continued walking forward. But Feng Yu was incomparably unhesitated for a moment before following behind. Just look at the way they chased each other and fought. Jing Yu regarded Fang Zicheng as a friend, but who was watching from the side to be deliberately avoiding her cold sweat. His alienation made Jing Yu feel a little strange, but she didn't say anything. Side of the rockery, Jing Yu's original intention was to come out to relax. But she seemed to have made herself unhappy. Xiaobai, you bastard. After exchanging a few words, let go of me. Jing Yu turned around and returned no matter how hard she struggled. Fang Zicheng stood where he was and watched Jing Yu leave, but it didn't have any effect. He lowered his head slightly to hide the bitterness in his eyes. Xiaobai frowned and turned around and walked back along the path he came from. Feng Yu held her arm that was hurt and looked at Xiaobai angrily. Was already inside. She was unwilling to admit defeat, saw that which made Xiaobai raise his eyebrows coldly and said in dissatisfaction, "Play by yourself. It's so late. I don't have time to play with you." Around? Xiaobai said it was a little stuffy in the room, so I went out for a walk. Xiaobai was going to leave after bullying her and said, she immediately felt a burst of anger and rushed towards Xiaobai without thinking. Xiaochen replied and suddenly unsheathed the sword in his hand and pointed it at his hand to dismiss when he turned his head and the others before saying his eyes were cold and impatient. You are not allowed to walk around. Don't push your luck. This
The
is the palace.
iciness in Feng Yu's words
Jing Yu
was
smiled
so
and
deep
said,
that Xiao
I
Bai's
just went out
impatient
and
gaze
bumped
was
into
filled
Feng
with
Zicheng.
displeasure.
Feng
It was
Zicheng
as
has
if he was
changed a
unwilling
lot
to look
compared
at
to
Feng Yu.
before.
Feng Yu
You
froze
also
in
know
place.
that it was in the past?
He looked at Xiao Bai's
Chen was
impatient
very
expression,
dissatisfied
and the
as he
cold
reached
tip of
out
his
and
sword that was
half-hugged Jing
pointed
Yu
at
as he
him.
walked towards
They
the
had
bed
been
and
fooling
said,
around for a
These
long
few days,
time,
I
but
have been
Xiao Bai
feeling
had never been
uneasy.
serious.
You stay in the
But today,
palace and don't
looking
go
at
out to
Xiao Bai's
places like
appearance,
restaurants,
Feng Yu was
okay?
completely shocked. Xiao Bai really hated
Chapter
her, right?
1815.
Xiao Bai didn't even
When
look
Jing
at
Yu
Feng Yu.
heard Xiao Chen's
He
words,
raised his
she
hand and put
immediately
away his
frowned
sword.
and asked,
Then
Is it that
he turned
serious?
and left. We don't
Feng
know
Yu
the
looked at
details
Xiao
of the
Bai's
enemy,
back.
so it's
For a
better to
moment,
be careful
she
for
felt
the
that
time
Xiao
being.
Bai was so
Xiao
cold
Chen looked
and
deeply
distant.
at Jing Yu and said,
Feng Yu frowned
Jing
and
Yu
stood in
slowly
place.
nodded in
When
agreement.
Yin Xiao
She
saw
was
that
pregnant,
the two of them
so
finally
Jing Yu didn't
stopped
dare
fighting
to
from
act
afar.
recklessly.
She instantly
When
heaved a
Xiao Chen
sigh
saw
of
Jing Yu
relief.
nod in
No
agreement,
matter which
he
one of them
slowly
caused
let out
a
a sigh
ruckus,
of relief.
it would be disastrous.
In the next few days,
Feng
the
Yu
prince's
sat alone
mansion
at
was
the edge
very
of the
lively.
rockery.
Feng
Jing
Ling
Lang
took in
and
the
Feng
entire
Zicheng
scene.
hadn't seen each
He
other
stood in
for a long
place
time,
and was silent
and
for
when
a
they
while.
met, they ate
Then
and
he
drank
walked
to their
towards
heart's
Feng Yu.
content.
The two of them talked for a long
Feng
time
Yu
in the
looked at the
pavilion,
pair of shoes that
sometimes
appeared in front of
laughing
her
and
sometimes
pursed her
being
lips
silent.
slightly.
Jing
Big
Yu
brother
and
Feng
Feng
Ju walked along
Even
the
if
corridor.
she didn't raise her head,
From afar,
she
Jing
knew
Yu
who
was
saw
standing
Helly
in
and
front of
Theo
her,
sitting under a tree.
Where does it hurt?
Helly and Theo
Feng
was
Ling
sitting by the
slowly
water
squatted
beside
down
the
and
willow
asked Feng
pond.
Yu.
His
It's
eyes
nothing.
were quietly looking
Feng
at
Yu
the
lowered
ripples
her
in the
head
water
and didn't
in the
speak
distance.
again.
Why
Jing
don't
Yu
you say
looked at
it?
Helly and
You
Theo
don't even
and
say that
slightly
you're
frowned.
injured.
She turned to
Feng
Feng
Ling
Ju
reached
and
out
said,
and lifted Feng
Sister-in-law,
Yu's hand.
you go back
Her
first.
wrist was red
I'll
and
be there in a
bruised.
while. It was obvious
Feng
that
Ju
she had been
glanced
hit.
at Helly and Theo
Feng
and
Ling's
gently
eyes
smiled
changed
and
slightly
nodded.
and he said,
Jing Yu then
Admit
turned
defeat.
and walked in the
There's
direction
nothing
of
weak
Helly and
about it.
Theo.
Jing Yu's footsteps probably woke Helly and Theo up. At this
Chapter
moment, Helly and Theo
1825.
turned his head
I
and
don't
saw
like
Jing
it.
Yu.
He
Feng Yu
slightly stood
retracted
up.
her hand and said
Sit down.
stubbornly, After
Silly
walking for a
girl,
long
how
time,
can anyone
I'm
feel
tired.
sorry for you?
Jing Yu also
Feng
sat
Ling
down
helped
on the
Feng
stone
Yu up
chair
and said,
Helly
Let's
and
go
Theo
and apply
also
some
sat
medicinal
down.
wine.
You seem
Big
to have
brother
something
Ling,
on your
does
mind
Xiao
these
Bai
few
really
days.
hate me?
Jing Yu
Feng
turned her
Yu
head
looked
to
up
look
at
at
Feng
Helly
Ling
and
and
Xiao's
asked,
face and asked
Feng
with a
Ling was
slight
silent
smile.
for a moment.
Then
Nothing.
looked down at Feng
I'll
Yu and
leave when
asked,
Feng Emma
Why do
wakes
you want
up.
him to like you?
Helly and Theo
pursed his lips
I didn't want him
slightly
to
and
like
replied,
me.
Why are
Feng
you
Yu
in
in
such
such
a
a
hurry?
hurry?
Turned red. Jing Yu
Then
was
why do
slightly
you
taken
care if he
aback.
hates you or not?
She turned to look at Helly
After
and
Feng
Theo
Ling
and said
asked,
this with a
Did
cold
something
face.
happen at
Feng Yu
Northern
was stunned for a
Pastoral?
moment. Then she also
Helly
lowered
and
her
Theo
head.
shook his head
Yes,
slightly and said,
since she didn't
It's
think
just
he would
that we've
like
been
her,
out for a
why
long
should
time,
she care if he
and
hated
it's
her
time to
or
go
not?
back.
From the
Jing Yu
beginning,
frowned
it was
when she
just
heard
her
Helly
temper.
and Theo's words.
After going against
When she saw
Xiao
that
Bai for a
Helly and
long
Theo
time,
didn't want to
she
talk
became
about it,
unscrupulous
she calmly
and
curled
thought
her
that
lips
this person
and
didn't
didn't say
always be
anything.
like this.
She
But
sat
now it
quietly
seemed that
for a
this
moment
wasn't the
before
case.
she got up and left.
Feng Yu silently
Jing Yu
lowered her
walked
head.
forward for a while.
Xiao Yu, you've
When
grown
she
up.
saw the person
If you
walking
continue
towards
to be
her,
so
she was
willful,
slightly
the one who
stunned.
will be hurt is
Feng
still
Zicheng
you.
probably didn't
After
expect
Feng
to
Ling
meet
helped
Jing Yu
Feng
by the
Yu
river.
apply the medicine,
Feng
she said
Zicheng
these slightly
words.
stopped in his
Feng
tracks
Yu
and
froze
bowed
in
to
place,
Jing Yu, watching Feng Ling walk
Jing
away.
Yu looked at Feng
Suddenly,
Zicheng
she felt
silently
very for a
sad.
moment.
She
Unknowingly,
actually
she
didn't
had
know how
already
to
passed
address
the age
Feng
of being
Zicheng.
willful. It didn't
Brother
seem
Ling,
appropriate
I
to
know.
call him by his
Feng
name.
Yu slightly
Calling
lowered
him
her
young
head.
Master
The
Feng
night was
sounded
deep
very
and
distant.
everyone was sleeping
Zicheng,
soundly.
where are you going?
Yu wandered around
Jing
the
Yu
palace.
was silent for a
She
moment
didn't know
before
if it was
she
because
calmly
this was the
addressed him
only
in such a
path she
gentle
knew,
manner,
or if it was
her
because her
expression
heart was
didn't
thinking
change.
about that person.
However,
But
when
she
Feng
unconsciously
Zicheng heard
walked
this,
to this
he
place.
immediately froze
Standing
on the
in the
spot.
corridor,
He
Su
looked
Yu
up at
suddenly
Jing Yu.
stopped in her tracks.
When
Her
he
heart
saw
was
Jing Yu's
slightly
calm
conflicted.
expression, he
Should
slowly
she continue
suppressed
walking,
the strange
or should she
beating
turn
of his
around
heart.
and go back?
I want to take a walk
Su
on
Yu
the
thought of
street.
the scene during the day,
Feng
and her
Zicheng
face
slightly
suddenly
raised
became
his
hot.
eyebrows and replied.
She fiercely clenched
Then
her
be
teeth
careful.
and thought that she must
Jing
go
Yu
and
nodded
beat and
Xing
smiled slightly
Thinking
before
of
she
this,
walked past
Su
Fang
Yu's
Zicheng.
footsteps once
Fang
again
Zicheng
walked
turned
forward.
around and looked
When
at
she
Jing
approached
Yu's
the
back.
entrance of the
Back
courtyard,
then,
she
he
had
saw
wondered
the
many
person lying
times
by
when
the
Jing
door
Yu would call
vomiting.
him Zicheng.
Su Yu
However,
recognized
he
him
didn't
at a
expect to
glance.
hear it today.
Wasn't this
What
Xing Yi?
Fang Zicheng was
What's
thinking
wrong
was
with
that
you?
Jing Yu wouldn't
Su
shout
Yu
his
quickly
name
walked
so
over
loudly
and looked
anymore.
at Xing Yi as
She
he
wouldn't
stood up
drag him along
shakily.
on the streets
The smell
and
of
ask him to
alcohol
treat her
was
to
so
a meal.
strong that Su
She
Yu
wouldn't get
instantly
lost
frowned
and
when
ask
she
him to
smelled
send
it.
her back to the
You
prince's
drank.
mansion.
Su
That
Yu
noisy
reached out
little
to
girl
support
was
Xing
carefree
when
and
Xing Yi heard
unrestrained,
Su Yu's
as
voice.
if she didn't care
He turned
about
his head
anything.
and looked over.
Now,
He
everything was
frowned
gone.
slightly when he saw Su Yu.
He raised his hand to shake
Chapter
off Su Yu and
18:16.
walked forward. Fang
Why are
Zicheng
you
slowly
drinking when you're
retracted his
injured?
gaze and walked outside.
Su Yu looked at Xing Yi,
The surroundings
who couldn't even
seemed to be
walk
quiet.
steadily.
Jing
She
Yu
narrowed her
and
eyes
chased after him
seriously.
again. She returned
It's
to her
none of your
room and
business.
sat down.
Xing Yi
She
seemed to
actually
be
felt
very
so
angry
irritated.
and shook off Su
Not
Yu's
long
hand.
after,
He
Xiao
lost
Bai
his
came
balance
again.
and was
He
about to
chatted
fall
with
forward.
Jing Yu for a while
Su Yu
before
quickly
leaving
stepped
again.
forward and
In the
grabbed
blink of
Xing
an
Yi's
eye,
hand.
5
Her
or
heart
6
was
days filled
fast.
with anger. Feng Ling also came. Jing Yu
Without
heard the
saying a
news
word,
of Feng Ling's
she dragged
arrival
him
and
into the
hurriedly
room
went
and
to the
threw
side
him onto the
courtyard.
bed. Xiao Chen and the others were in the courtyard. Su Yu's face was red with anger. You were like that during the day, and now you're telling me not to waiting outside. When they saw Jing Yu that you're really annoying, they all turned around. Su Yu fiercely threw the towel slightly to the others and said, she looked at the situation in the room and asked with a frown. He suddenly laughed. What's the situation inside? He laughed so happily, but it made Su Yu frown even deeper. They just went in forward and raised her hand to wipe Jing Yi's face with the towel. Jing Yu said calmly after hearing Jing Yu's question. My brother Ling is here. Nothing will happen. 1826. Just as Jing Yu was worrying, cried out she suddenly heard and wanted to crawl under the blanket. When Jing Yu turned her head to look, she discovered that the little girl, Su Yu this chance, had also He turned over and pressed her down. She immediately arched her eyebrows in interest and said, your big brother Ling is so powerful. Perhaps it was because she had made a promise and opened her heart. Young people. Su Yu was so immersed in it. Impolitely. Xing Yi only got up when the sun was high up in the sky. Yu was talking to Jing Yu. That open wound was harder to heal. Could say anything. Although she heard a very impolite snort from behind her. When Jing Yu turned around, but to bandage it again. Xiao walking while over. Su Yu was bathing in the water. Xiao Interrogation Officer 1 went to get Su Yu's clothes. He then turned to look at Jing Lang and originally, called out, Interrogation Officer Why 3 and Interrogation Officer 15 were curious as to why their boss hadn't woken up yet. I had nothing to do over there. They didn't expect to see Interrogation Officer 1. Who knew that I would hear such shameless beaming with joy when he got up. Xiaobai said as he looked at Xing Yi and the others, he even greeted them cheerfully, which made Xing Yi and the others feel strange. When Fengyu saw Xiaobai, but what was even stranger was that Xing Yi actually went to get a set of women's clothes and even called a servant girl into the house to serve him. If it wasn't for my brother Ling telling me to use goo, I would have caught one and scared you to a long time before leaving how to control goo and clothes in her arms with a red curiously when she heard this strange scene made Xing San, who in Xing doesn't know how to do each other in dismay as a bold guess arose in their minds. In our Miaojiang, Xing Yi and Xing Yi were discussing whether to ask Xing Yi. Since you are so powerful, saw the door open. Why did you come to the mainland? Xing Yi walked out, just followed by your Miaojiang. How could they not raised his eyebrows coldly? He looked at Fengyu up and down and said, Constellation I see that you have learned martial arts from the mainland. She came out of Xing Yi's house early in the morning. I'm too lazy to talk to you. No matter how many excuses you have, you can't explain yourself. She glared at Xiaobai fiercely and looked at the scene with their mouths agape. She sat on the side and didn't say anything. Now, Jing Yu looked at this scene and shook her head helplessly. Xing Yi's mouth twitched violently. She really didn't know why Xiaobai and this world were against each other. Su Yu also saw Xing Yi and Xing Yi. Their gazes were like searchlights, which made Su Yu blush even more. Interrogation Officer 1's brows furrowed tightly, and he coughed in displeasure. Hello, sister-in-law. When Xing Yi and Xing Yi heard Xing Yi's cough, they immediately stood up straight and greeted her loudly. Su Yu was stunned. Her expression didn't change for a long time. Instead, she blushed even redder. She nodded slightly at Xing Yi and Xing Yi. In front of the courtyard door, Su Yu looked at Xing Yi's hand and said unhappily, You can't hold the sword anymore. Rest well. Okay. Xing nodded. Su. She looked to Xing Yi's. She showed off and said, She. Interrogation Officer 1 frowned slightly, but he had no choice but to agree. He reached out to hold Su Yu's hand and moved a little closer. Su Yu suddenly felt nervous and hurriedly took a step back. With a red face, she said, We're outside. Rest well. I'll take my leave first. Su Yu finished her sentence quickly and turned to leave. Xing Yi frowned unhappily. He thought to himself that he should have stayed a little longer in the house. When he turned around, he saw Xing Yi and Xing Yi's searchlight-like eyes. What do you want to ask? I'll give you 15 minutes to finish. Xing Yi crossed his arms and looked calmly at Xing Yi and Xing Yi. Chapter 1827. Big Brother. Was that Su Yu, the palace lord of Constellation Palace? Were you together last night? Was she the one who chased after you in the past? Now you've made up. Are you together? 15th Interrogation Officer seized the opportunity to ask questions. Xing Yi frowned slightly at 15th Interrogation Officer's questions. After a moment of silence, he nodded and replied, Yes. Yes. Just one yes. That's it. 15th Interrogation Officer was going crazy. He glared at Xing Yi and said, Big brother, don't you have anything to say? Does that mean we're going to have a sister-in-law soon? 15th interrogation officer was very excited. Xing Yi nodded slowly and replied again. 15th interrogation officer laughed unhappily, but 3rd interrogation officer's face didn't look too good. Big brother, 3rd interrogation officer was silent for a moment, then called out, "Are you leaving the disciplinary guard too?" Xing Yi looked at 3rd interrogation officer, slightly bowed his head, then went forward and pressed 3rd interrogation officer's shoulder, saying, "You'll reach this step sooner or later. Don't think too much." "Why can't I stay in the disciplinary guard after getting married?" 3rd interrogation officer looked at Xing Yi in confusion and said, "Second brother left just like that. Now big brother is leaving too." 3rd interrogation officer, "You'll understand in the future." Xing Yi retracted his hand and said calmly, "Although I'm not in the disciplinary guard, I'll be back at any time. I'm not leaving. You don't have to be like this. Take good care of master and madam in the future." 3rd interrogation officer understood Xing Yi's words, but he was very unhappy. He pursed his lips tightly and didn't say anything. Jing Yu and Xiao Chen were really resting in the room. After the imperial physician went to check on Feng Maching, he turned around and checked on Jing Yu's pulse to see if there was anything wrong with her. After the diagnosis, he found that Jing Yu was very healthy and so was the baby. "I already said that the child is very healthy. You don't have to keep checking his pulse," Jing Yu said to Xiao Chen helplessly as she watched the imperial physician leave. "Just in case." Xiao Chen nodded calmly and said, "As long as the child is healthy." Jing Yu looked at Xiao Chen, who was completely unwilling to listen. Her lips twitched, but she turned her head helplessly. Just as she was about to say something, she heard a voice coming from outside. Yin Xiao came to report that Xing Yi was requesting an audience. Jing Yu frowned slightly. Why did Xing Yi suddenly want to see her so formally? Could it be that there was some new development? "Let him in." Xiao Chen nodded slightly and called him in. Xing Yi stepped in and stood silently at the side. Then, he suddenly knelt down and said in a very solemn voice, "Subordinate Xing Yi greets master and madam." Jing Yu looked at Xing Yi's formal manner and sat up slightly. Her entire person also became serious. Xiao Chen looked at Xing Yi and sat silently. He didn't say anything and didn't call for him to rise. "Xing Yi, have you made your decision?" Finally, when Jing Yu couldn't take it anymore, Xiao Chen asked calmly. "Yes, subordinate has made his decision," Xing Yi replied solemnly. Jing Yu, who was listening at the side, was confused. What kind of riddle were these two playing? "All right, since you have made your decision, then you may leave." Xiao Chen slowly lowered his head and said, "This king's words are still valid." "Thank you, master." Xing Yi said deeply. "From today onwards, Xing Yi will officially retire from the disciplinary guards. Thank you, master, for taking me in all these years." Chapter 1828. When Jing Yu heard this, she finally understood what was going on. Instantly, she widened her eyes in shock and pursed her lips deeply. So it was Interrogation Officer 1 who wanted to withdraw from the guards. But why was that? "Xing Yi, where are you going after leaving the disciplinary guard?" Jing Yu pursed her lips and asked, "To the Constellation Palace." Xing Yi raised his head slightly and looked at Xiao Chen and Jing Yu. He said, "Your subordinate is going to marry Su Yu. When the time comes, I hope that master and madam can honor me with your presence." "I see." Jing Yu came to a sudden realization. Beside her, Xiao Chen's lips also curled up slightly. He looked at Interrogation Officer 1 calmly and said, "It's been so long, and you've finally achieved something. It's not easy. In my opinion, it's better to say that Xing Yi didn't manage to escape from Su Yu's evil clutches." Jing Yu's eyes were tinged with a faint smile. "Xing Yi and Su Yu were on and off. You've been chasing me for so long, and now you've finally said it? Since you've decided, then go. However, Su Yu can't leave during this period of time. I'm afraid you guys will have to suffer for a while." Xiao Chen pursed his lips and said, "Master, don't worry. Before we can guarantee the safety of madam and master, we won't leave. Besides, your subordinate needs time to prepare." Xing Yi nodded slowly. After saying a few more words, Xing Yi left. Looking at Xing Yi's departing figure, Jing Yu's eyes were full of sighs. She curled her lips and said, "They're really all in pairs." "Isn't it good?" Xiao Chen leaned back slightly and said with narrowed eyes. "Of course it's good." Jing Yu smiled and turned to look at Xiao Chen. She said, "Is there any news about Little Potato in the past few days?" "There's no news about Little Potato, but there's news about Qingge." Xiao Chen pursed his lips and said, "Maybe Qingge can bring us news about Little Potato." "Really? Where's Qingge now?" Jing Yu's eyes lit up and she asked happily. "Qingge said that he's going to find someone. When he finds that person, he'll meet us at Tokyo." Xiao Chen pursed his lips and said, "I reckon that the person that Qingge is looking for will take at least a month." After hearing Xiao Chen's words, Jing Yu lowered her head helplessly. It would be a year in a few months. Where was Little Potato? Jing Yu sighed deeply and her eyes were full of longing. How did a year pass so quickly? She wasn't even prepared yet. Was Little Potato cured? Was he healthy? In a year, Little Potato must have grown up a lot, right? Would he still recognize her as his mother? Jing Yu thought about it and sat down worriedly. Her eyes were full of sorrow. Xiao Chen knew what Jing Yu was thinking. He reached out to hold Jing Yu's hand and said, "Don't worry too much. Little Potato will be fine." "I hope so." Jing Yu replied absent-mindedly. Then she stared out of the window in a daze. After interrogation 1 finished talking to Xiao Chen, he suddenly felt his whole body relax. For a moment he wondered if all of this was just a dream. Why did it come true just when he was thinking about it? Xing Yi couldn't help but laugh. Looking at the familiar Wang mansion, he felt uncomfortable that he was about to leave. On the other side, Su Yu had returned to her own room. She lay on the table and stared at the long sword in a daze. Thinking about what happened last night, thinking about Interrogation Officer 1, she blushed and buried her head in her arms. However, the smile on her lips could not be stopped. Chapter 1829. Everything was as illusory as a dream. If the long sword wasn't really in her arms, Su Yu would really think that everything was a perfect dream that she created. Just as Su Yu's imagination was running wild, there was movement outside. Su Yu stood up and opened the door. "Palace Master." Ling Yong stood in front of Su Yu's door covered in dust. "Ling Yong? You're back? How is it? How is the information that I asked you to investigate?" Su Yu quickly stepped aside and let Ling Yong in. "I found it. The man from Yaojiang is in the Imperial City. He probably noticed our investigation. Last night, he went out of the city and went up a mountain. This subordinate did not dare to alert the enemy, so I have been guarding at the foot of the mountain. Today I came back." Ling Yong said very deeply. "Great. Let's go and tell the 9th Emperors and the 9th Imperial Concubine." Su Yu nodded slowly, stood up and walked towards Jing Yu and Xiao Chen's room. Everyone was sitting in the room. Ling Yong repeated what he just said. After Jing Yu and the others heard it, they suddenly became silent. Jing Yu turned to look at Ling Yong and said, "You said that the man from Yaojiang hid in the mountain. It shouldn't be a mountain." Xiao Chen shook his head slightly and said, "On the mountain outside the city, there is a Taoist temple. It's just that this Taoist temple is very remote and there are few people. I guess that the man from Yaojiang is hiding there. According to Protector Ling's description, it should be that mountain." Xiao Chen turned to look at Ling Yong and said, "Whether or not he's hiding there, I'll know when I take a look." Feng Ling said calmly, "If the man from Yaojiang is hiding there, then he must have placed poison around. You can't go there easily. Protector Ling, I'm afraid I'll have to trouble you to lead the way tomorrow. I'll go and see what's going on." Feng Ling turned to look at Ling Yong and said, Ling Yong nodded slowly. "Protector Ling, after the man from Yaojiang hid, did anyone suspicious go up the mountain?" Jing Yu was silent for a moment before asking. "That's not true." Ling Yong slowly shook his head and said, "Just like what the 9 emperors said, this mountain is very remote, no one would be here, there are very few people passing by, I don't know how the people of Miaojiang found this place." "That's true." Xiao Chen nodded slowly and said, "If it weren't for the fact that Xing Yi told this king that there was a Taoist temple in the mountain, this king wouldn't have known. If that's the case, the person who found this place should be someone we know. Jing Yu narrowed her eyes. If that's the case, it's obvious that someone from the imperial city helped the people of Miaojiang and even pointed out a place where they could hide. Fang Zicheng narrowed his eyes and said, I haven't seen any strange people on the streets these few days. Ever since the Tokyo Imperial City became big, there are even more people coming and going in the Tokyo Imperial City. It's really not easy to find out who helped. Fang Zicheng said deeply. That's right. Jing Yu also slowly nodded and said, if that's the case, Zicheng, why don't you go wait in the restaurant every day? I don't know why, but I have a strong feeling that this person will definitely show up in the restaurant. Fang Zicheng nodded slightly and said, after hearing about Feng Moqing, I also thought that the chances of waiting in the restaurant would be higher. Chapter 1830. Jing Yu nodded slowly, and everyone else nodded as well. After some discussion, they dispersed. Why did these people from Miaojiang appear at the Tokyo? It was really puzzling. Su Yu and Ling Yong also walked back to their own courtyard. Su Yu looked at Ling Yong, who didn't even have time to change his clothes, and said with a smile, it's been hard on you these past few days. Go back and have a good rest. Thank you for your concern, Palace Lord. Ling Yong nodded. Ling Yong and Su Yu stayed in the same courtyard. When Su Yu was carefully wiping Interrogation Officer 1's sword in the house, she heard a knock on the door. Hearing that it was Ling Yong's voice outside the door, she paused for a moment, then raised her voice to call him in. Palace Lord, have something to eat. Ling Yong walked in with a bowl of soup in his hands. When he walked in front of Su Yu, he saw the long sword on the table. The moment he saw the long sword, Ling Yong was stunned. I told you to have a good rest. Why did you bring food? Su Yu shook her head helplessly. She reached out and sheathed the long sword, then turned to look at Ling Yong. Palace Lord, this sword. Ling Yong frowned slightly. How could he not recognize this sword? Oh, it's nothing. Su Yu shook her head slightly and said, I'll announce it when I return to the Constellation Palace. Announce what? Ling Yong suddenly had a bad premonition. Just as Su Yu was about to answer, there was another knock on the door. When Su Yu turned to look, she saw Xing Yi walking in. Why you here? Su Yu was slightly stunned when she saw Xing Yi. Ling Yong didn't think twice and blocked Su Yu's side. His eyes were filled with vigilance as he looked at Xing Yi. I'm here to change my dressing. Xing Yi glanced at Ling Yong. There was a hint of scrutiny in his eyes. I just applied the medicine this morning. I don't want to change it now. Su Yu didn't know whether to laugh or cry. This person came to find someone, but he couldn't come up with a better excuse. Su Yu stared at Xing Yi and said, don't even think about taking your sword back. You're not allowed to use it now. Got it? Interrogation Officer 1's gaze turned to Ling Yong. He nodded slowly and said, Guardian Ling, it's been a long time. Xing Yi, what are you doing here again? Ling Yong looked at Xing Yi with an unpleasant expression. Ling Yong, don't be rude. Su Yu looked at Ling Yong and frowned. She pursed her lips slightly and said, you can leave now. I have something to say to Xing Yi. Palace Master? Ling Yong was anxious. Get down. Su Yu frowned unhappily. Ling Yong was extremely unwilling, but he still silently retreated. When he closed the door, he looked at Xing Yi with an extremely cold gaze. Xing Yi smiled indifferently. Tell me, why did you suddenly come here? Su Yu looked at Xing Yi faintly and asked. Your subordinate seems to dislike me. Xing Yi looked at the soup on the side and silently took a bite. Then he nodded with satisfaction and said, this soup is very good. After saying that, Interrogation Officer 1 quietly drank the entire bowl of soup. Only then did he say very calmly, I'll get the kitchen to make you another bowl. Hey! Su Yu looked at Xing Yi and suddenly didn't know whether to laugh or cry. She said helplessly, do you know that you're really childish? I know. Xing Yi calmly wiped the corner of his mouth. Then he turned to look at Su Yu and said, I'll be very unhappy to see my woman being coveted by another man, not to mention that this person is the protector who has been following you. Chapter 1831. When Su Yu heard Xing Yi's words, she glared at Xing Yi and said, "You are really direct." "Did I say something wrong?" Xing Yi asked Su Yu calmly with raised eyebrows. "If it weren't for your previous attitude, how could my subordinates treat you so badly?" Su Yu turned her head away and said unhappily, "You deserve it." Xing Yi suddenly lowered his head in annoyance and said, "If I knew you would be so determined, why would I refuse? At that time, life and death were not up to me. I didn't want to hold you back. Moreover, you and I were still young at that time. I just thought you were being impulsive." Xing Yi said very calmly, "If I didn't see Master and Madam, if I didn't hear Madam's words, maybe I wouldn't try to take this step." When Su Yu heard Xing Yi's words, she was silent. "By saying this, are you telling me that if one day you're in danger again, you'll still choose to escape by yourself?" Su Yu stared at Interrogation Officer 1 and asked. Interrogation Officer 1 was stunned when he heard Su Yu's words. "I am here to tell you that I have already told Master that I have left the Xing guards. Now I am free." Xing Yi did not answer Su Yu's question, but said such a sentence. It should have been a great thing, but when Su Yu heard Xing Yi's words, she was silent. "I know," Su Yu calmly responded. Xing Yi looked at Su Yu's appearance and reached out to hold Su Yu's hand. "Since I have decided to marry you, I will not leave you," Xing Yi said as he bent down slightly and kissed Su Yu's forehead. He said, "I almost missed you. How can I have the courage to let you go again? It's good that you know." When Su Yu heard Xing Yi's words, her eyes were suddenly tinged with a faint smile. The two of them were intimate in the room for a long time. When the sky darkened, Xing Yi got up and left. Su Yu went out to send him off. Looking at Xing Yi's departing figure, her eyes were full of gentleness. "Palace Master." Ling Yong's voice came from behind. Su Yu turned her head. "This is the prince's residence. You don't have to stand guard here." The smile on Su Yu's face gradually disappeared. She looked coldly at Ling Yong and said, "Soon I will marry Xing Yi. In the future, he will also be half your master." Ling Yong's face suddenly changed and his eyes were full of astonishment. "If you feel that it's inappropriate, then let Wanqing serve you. You've been busy for so long, it's time to find a good girl and start a family." Su's face's words, "Sichen." It pierced deeply into his heart, causing his face to instantly turn snow white, without any color. "Palace Master, you know that I—" Ling Yong said with a heart full of anxiety. "I know." Su Yu suddenly raised her voice and said, "But don't you know even better? There has never been a second person in my heart. I don't want to say more. I don't want to say more. I don't want to break up with you." Su Yu's words were so clear. Even if Ling Yong had thousands of words in his heart, he couldn't say a single word. This subordinate has overstepped. Ling Yong slowly lowered his head and stood respectfully to the side. "You may leave," Su Yu replied coldly. She looked at Ling Yong's lonely figure disappearing into the night. Although she couldn't bear it, Su Yu understood that if she didn't make things clear now, it would be even harder to do so in the future. Chapter 1832. The next morning, Feng Ling and Ling Yong went out. Xiaobai was returning from outside. Recently, Xiaobai had been learning about the affairs of the imperial court and had begun to get involved in the affairs of the imperial court. His identity as the crown prince was gradually becoming known. Xiao Chen never said anything to teach him. No matter what it was, he let Xiaobai handle it himself. If it was right, he let Xiaobai experience it himself. If it was wrong, he let Xiaobai find a way to make up for it. As long as Xiaobai didn't speak, Xiao Chen wouldn't say a word. However, Xiaobai was stubborn and didn't ask for help. Although the father and son weren't biological, they looked really similar. 11. Are they going to the temple outside the city? Xiao Chen gave Xiaobai the right to use the guards. Xiaobai kept 11 by his side and could order him around at any time. "Yes, Crown Prince." 11 nodded slowly. "The people from Yaojiang have been causing a lot of trouble in the residence recently." Xiaobai frowned slightly and walked into the courtyard of the king's mansion. He saw Feng Yu walking towards him. Feng Yu also saw Xiaobai and stopped in her tracks. Just as Feng Yu was about to speak, Xiaobai turned and walked to the other side. Let's go see father and mother first. Sir. 11th interrogation officer was slightly taken aback, but he bowed in response. Looking at Feng Yu, who was standing in place, he nodded slightly in greeting and then turned to chase after Xiaobai. Feng Yu stood in place and clenched her fists slightly. Then, without doing anything, she turned and went out. The streets were bustling. Feng Yu walked on the street and looked at the bustling streets. Her head was slightly lowered. She was in a good mood today, but because she met Xiaobai at the entrance of the mansion, her mood suddenly became gloomy. Just as Feng Yu was thinking about what to do, she was suddenly bumped into by someone. Feng Yu immediately exclaimed, "Do you have eyes?" Feng Yu was already in a bad mood. How could someone bump into her while she was walking on the streets? She became even angrier and shouted angrily at the person who bumped into her. The girl was dressed in plain clothes and was holding snacks in her hand. She seemed to be the same age as Feng Yu, but she couldn't be younger than 1 or 2 years. She frowned at Feng Yu and said, "I didn't do it on purpose. I didn't see anyone behind me." The corners of Feng Yu's mouth curled up in disdain. With a displeased expression, she said, "One look and I can tell you're a wild girl who hasn't seen the world." The little girl was very angry, but Feng Yu completely ignored her. She turned around and walked away. A call came from the side. The little girl turned around and saw a woman running over worriedly. She said, "Yun, are you all right? There are a lot of carriages on this road. Don't run around by yourself." "Mother, I'm fine." Yun smiled sweetly at the woman. This pair of mother and daughter were naturally Yun Tian's wife, and Yuqing and daughter, Yun. "It's good that you're fine. Your father is still waiting for us at the inn. Have you bought enough? If that's enough, let's go." And Yuqing patted Yun's head and asked, "It's gone." Yun looked at the food on the ground and said, "I bumped into someone and dropped it. I wanted to buy some for Dad, let's go buy some more." Yun looked up at Yuqing and said, Okay, I know you're good to your father." And Yuqing smiled helplessly. Chapter 1833. Of course not, is also good to mother. Yun said with a smile. Feng Yu walked to the door of the rich restaurant and curiously looked at the decoration in front of the door. When she walked in, a maid came forward to greet her and politely asked Feng Yu what she wanted. She didn't look down on Feng Yu because of her young age. Feng Yu curiously looked at the strange names on the menu and ordered some things based on her own guesses. Then, she sat at the side and waited. She looked at the decoration in the restaurant and then looked at the people who were eating. Which one of them wasn't dressed decently and talked well? This restaurant was really famous and very special. Not to mention the food, just the service and decoration were already very surprising. When the food was served, the color of the food was moving and the smell was so enticing. Feng Yu suddenly became hungry, but this thing looked a bit strange. This was the first time she really didn't dare to eat it. She silently looked at the table beside her and saw that these people were eating very happily. Feng Yu silently picked up the food and ate it. Oh, delicious! Feng Yu's eyes were full of light. After eating the first bite, she immediately began to eat big pieces. While she was eating happily, she suddenly saw a woman wearing a bamboo hat come in. Her clothes were very simple. Feng Yu took a glance and then withdrew her gaze. Why is she wearing a veil in broad daylight? Although Feng Yu thought in her heart, she didn't say much. Food was more important. While Feng Yu was eating happily, she suddenly saw another person come in. But this time, it was an acquaintance. Feng Yu wanted to greet him, but she saw the person who came in slowly shaking his head at Feng Yu. Wasn't this Feng Zicheng? Why didn't he let her greet him? Feng Yu sat down again and looked around while eating. She looked at Feng Zicheng and didn't know why Feng Zicheng didn't let her talk to him. Could it be that there was someone suspicious in this restaurant? Feng Yu's eyes darted around. Just as she was feeling curious, she saw the person walking into the restaurant. It was a smiling young lady wearing plain clothes. Beside her was a man and a woman. They were obviously the young lady's parents. When Feng Yu saw the young lady, she was stunned. Isn't this the person who bumped into me on the street? She even had to follow her parents out for a meal. She was really spoiled. Feng Yu turned her head away in disdain. Yun Tian held Yun Yun's hand and said, "The dishes in this restaurant are the best in Tokyo. Didn't Yun want to try it a long time ago? Are you satisfied now? You can try it now." Yun Yun answered happily. When she walked towards Feng Yu, she saw the table that Feng Yu was sitting at. It was such a big table, but Feng Yu was sitting alone and eating a pile of food. Yun Yun frowned slightly. Thinking of Feng Yu's attitude just now, she turned around and sat on the other side. There was a faint look of unhappiness in her eyes. "What's wrong?" And Yuqing raised her eyebrows and asked when she noticed the change in Yun Yun. "Nothing, mother. I'm hungry." Yun Yun said faintly and began to order food. While Feng Yu was happily eating, Feng Yu suddenly smelled a very familiar scent. Feng Yu's hand suddenly stopped. She seemed to be continuing to eat, but her little nose was twitching. Clearly, she was trying to identify this scent. Chapter 1834. This smell was very special, but Feng Yu could smell it clearly. Feng Yu turned her head and saw a woman wearing a bamboo hat sitting at the side. There was only a cup of tea and a few plates of desserts on the table. She just sat there quietly, sipping her tea from time to time. When Feng Yu saw this scene, her eyes turned slightly. She suddenly raised her hand and picked up the few plates of meat and vegetables on the table and placed them all on the girl's table. The girl wearing the bamboo hat frowned slightly. "I see that you don't have anything else to eat. Since I'm eating alone, I'll treat you," Feng Yu said with a smile and sat down beside the girl. "No need, I'm not hungry." When the woman saw Feng Yu suddenly approaching, she immediately moved slightly to the side with vigilance. However, she felt that her actions were too impolite or too deliberate, which made people feel strange. Moreover, this was only a child, so it shouldn't be a big deal. Thinking of this, the girl relaxed slightly. "Big sister, it's okay," Feng Yu said with a very innocent look. "I'll treat you." This. The girl frowned impatiently, but then she seemed to have thought of something. After slightly pursing her lips, she slowly reached out to pick up some food. The scar on her wrist was very obvious. "Aya, big sister," Feng Yu suddenly exclaimed, causing the girl's expression to change slightly. "Big sister, did someone bully you? What happened to your hand?" Feng Yu said with a face full of heartache. She raised her hand and grabbed the girl's hand. The scar was so scary that the girl's body tensed up as if she was ready to kill someone at any time. "Or will help you blow on it," Feng Yu said as she carefully blew on it. From the looks of it, she didn't have any other intentions. When the girl saw Feng Yu like this, her other hand hidden in her sleeve slowly retracted. She looked at the little girl and slowly pulled her hand back. "I was accidentally cut when I was practicing the sword. It's nothing." "But big sister knows how to practice the sword. So amazing," Feng Yu said with eyes full of excitement. "I also want to learn. Big sister, can you teach me?" "Big sister, where do you live? I don't know where to go to play by myself. Can I go play with you?" Feng Yu blinked and looked at the woman. The woman's expression changed slightly and she said in a deep voice, "I have something to do, so I'll be leaving first. Little sister, enjoy your meal." With that, the woman stood up and left in a hurry. Feng Yu sighed and said, "Why did she leave? So boring, I'm not eating anymore." Bill. Feng Yu willfully paid the money and then left, humming a little tune. Just as Feng Yu walked out, a man not far away silently put down the silver in his hand and followed her out. Yun Tian had been watching everything silently. When he saw this scene, he frowned deeply. "Wait for me here. I'll be right back," Yun Tian said to An Yuqing and Yun Yun before walking out. When he reached the door, he asked for the direction of the sealed jade and chased after it. In the dark alley, Feng Yu's eyes were filled with fear. She retreated step by step as she looked at the man in front of her and said, "You? Who are you? What do you want? Go away." Chapter 1835. Feng Yu's acting skills were simply incisive and vivid. The hand hidden behind her was quietly holding the soft whip, ready to attack at any time. But just as the man pulled out his dagger and was about to attack Feng Yu, a dart flew out from the dark. It hit his wrist, causing the dagger to fall out of his hand. "How could you lay your hands on a child?" A very cold voice rang out. Yun Tian's figure suddenly appeared. The two of them began to fight. That person panicked. When he wanted to escape, he was suddenly struck in the throat by a hidden dart that came out of nowhere. He directly fell to the ground. "So scary. Save me. Someone's trying to kill me." Feng Yu stared blankly for a few seconds, then hugged her head and cried bitterly, looking terrified. When the person hiding in the dark saw this, he frowned deeply. Then he turned around and walked to the other side. His indifferent voice sounded, "Could it be that I sensed wrongly?" That voice sounded like a question, but also like an explanation. Yun Tian looked at the familiar person and flew up to check the surroundings. He didn't find anything else and slowly frowned. "He's already gone. Don't cry." Yun Tian looked at the crying Feng Yu with a conflicted expression. "I'm so tired." Feng Yu's crying stopped abruptly. She silently wiped away the tears on her face, then curiously looked up at Yun Tian. The poison sect's eldest young master, Yun Tian. What a coincidence! Feng Yu beamed at Yun Tian. "You recognize me?" Yun Tian's curiosity was piqued. He looked at Feng Yu and narrowed his eyes. He asked very seriously, "Who are you?" "I didn't recognize you at first." Feng Yu stepped in front of Yun Tian and looked up at him tiredly. She said unhappily to Yun Tian, "Squat down a little, you're too tall." Yun Tian froze, then resigned himself to his fate and squatted down. He looked at Feng Yu and said, "Is that enough?" Feng Yu looked at Yun Tian's expression and nodded in satisfaction. "If it wasn't for the 9th Emperors and the 9th Imperial Concubine, I wouldn't have known a member of the poison sect like you. But after listening to my brother Ling talk about it a lot, I naturally knew." Feng Yu calmly shrugged and said, "I didn't think that person was you, but when I saw you fight the enemy, I knew." "Your big brother Ling?" Yun Tian raised his brows slightly and asked, "Who is your big brother Ling?" "I'm Feng Ling of the Dark Yin sect. My name is Feng Yu." Feng Yu blinked and looked curiously at Yun Tian. "Didn't your poison sect disband? What are you doing in the Imperial City? Are you here to do something bad?" "It turns out that you are the young hierarch of the Dark Yin sect." Yun Tian immediately felt relieved as he looked at Feng Yu's series of actions. He felt that it was very fitting. She really was a devil incarnate. "I'm just passing by, so I brought my family for a walk. I'll leave in a few days." Yun Tian pursed his lips and said seriously, "So that's how it is." Feng Yu nodded slowly. Then she seemed to have thought of something. She looked at Yun Tian with a conflicted expression and said, "You don't even know me, so why did you save me?" Chapter 1836. I can't just leave a little girl like her alone when I see someone following you, right? Yun Tian smiled faintly. Besides, Feng Yu was about the same age as his daughter. She would have followed him no matter what. "Oh, I used to think that no one in the poison sect was good. I didn't expect young Master Yun to have a conscience." Feng Yu beamed. "I'm leaving, I still have matters to attend to." "Wait a moment." Yun Tian stood up and looked at Feng Yu. "The capital hasn't been peaceful these past few days. When I entered the city, I saw a few corpses outside. I don't know what poison they were poisoned with, but it was very frightening. Remind Xiaochen to be careful." "You saw it?" Feng Yu suddenly stopped and looked at Yun Tian with a slight frown. "I saw it. That poison wasn't the poison sect's doing." Yun Tian nodded. "You should go talk to the 9th Emperors about this." Feng Yu frowned. "Since we're already here, there's nothing wrong with going to see the 9th Emperors, right?" Yun Tian frowned as if he didn't want to meet them. However, after thinking for a moment, he still said, "Since that's the case, I'll go and talk to them. If someone splashes dirty water on me, I won't be able to explain myself." "That's right." Feng Yu nodded. "You know where the Wang Manor is, right?" I'm leaving first. You can come over yourselves. Before Yun Tian could respond, Feng Yu left without looking back. Yun Tian shook his head helplessly. Feng Yu was about the same age as his daughter. How could their personalities be so different? Not long after Feng Yu left, Yun Tian returned to the restaurant. After talking to An Yuqing and Yun Yun, he headed for the Wang Manor. Fang Zicheng took in all of this and frowned at the scene in front of him. In the Wang Manor, Jing Yu came back after visiting Feng Maching. Seeing that Feng Maching had recovered well, she felt a little better. But before she could sit down, she heard a commotion outside. "Madam! The 9th Imperial Concubine. Big news!" The shouts came from afar. Jing Yu heard the familiar shouts and immediately shook her head. When would Feng Yu control her temper? Jing Yu shook her head slightly at Yin Qiao, indicating that she didn't need to stop her. Sure enough, she saw Feng Yu rush in anxiously. "What's wrong?" Jing Yu asked Feng Yu calmly. "Guess who I met on the street today?" Feng Yu looked at Jing Yu excitedly and asked. Jing Yu's expression froze. She looked at Feng Yu with a conflicted expression and said, "Feng Yu, are you here to play a guessing game with me or to tell me some news? You're so boring." Feng Yu saw that Jing Yu wasn't guessing at all. She frowned unhappily and said, "I went to your restaurant today. The food there is really delicious. I'm going to eat there tomorrow." "Yin Xiao, see the guest out." Jing Yu stood up and turned to walk into the room. Feng Yu quickly stepped in front of Jing Yu and blocked her. "I met that woman," Feng Yu said excitedly, "the woman who poisoned Feng Maching." "Really?" Jing Yu's expression changed instantly. She stared at Feng Yu and asked, "How do you know it was her? Did you see her face clearly? What did she say to you?" Jing Yu asked excitedly. Chapter 1837. I knew you would want to know. Feng Yu looked at Jing Yu proudly and said, "I met her when I was eating in the restaurant. I didn't know at first. Later, I smelled a familiar scent. It was the scent of voodoo. It was very fragrant. It was coming from her body." Feng Yu narrowed her eyes slightly and said, "I originally thought that the woman was also a voodoo cultivator from Yaojiang, but later I found out that she wasn't. I saw the wound on her hand and felt her pulse. Only then did I know that the woman wasn't a voodoo cultivator, but a person who was implanted with a voodoo." Feng Yu raised her eyebrows slightly and said, "Unfortunately, my cultivation is not enough. I don't know what kind of voodoo she was implanted with. But what I can be sure of is that the voodoo in this woman must be a very powerful voodoo. Otherwise, why would there be such a strong scent?" Feng Yu said very seriously. "You mean that woman is just a puppet?" Jing Yu heard Feng Yu's words and suddenly frowned tightly and asked. "I don't know." Feng Yu shook her head in confusion and said, "There are 3 kinds of situations. The first is that the woman is a puppet, the second is a substitute, and the third is a container." "What do you mean?" Jing Yu was slightly taken aback. She sat down and asked, "How should I put it? The most common case of a puppet is to control the person's thoughts, or to manipulate a death warrior and directly control the person. This is too rare. It is very rare even in Miaojiang. How can someone bring a puppet out of Miaojiang?" Feng Yu shook her head helplessly and said, "As for the substitute, it is to implant a voodoo in this person, and then the person who implanted the voodoo cultivates a mother voodoo. If the substitute is killed, the mother voodoo will die, and the person who implanted the voodoo will know. If the substitute is caught, the person who implanted the voodoo will kill the mother voodoo, and the substitute will also die. In our Miaojiang, there are too many people who use this method to control people." Feng Yu calmly shrugged and said, "As for the container, it means that this person's body is actually raising a goo. Using a human's body, placing goo worms into it, then laying eggs that will hatch directly in the human body. Finally, sucking the human's blood dry, the goo worms that come out will be the most evil and also the most beautiful goo worms. This kind of raising goo worms is not allowed. But there are still people who secretly use this method." Feng Yu pursed her lips slightly and said, "The woman I met smelled very good. This is the only way to emit such a fragrance from her skin. I really can't think of anything else." I saw the wound on her wrist. It looks like she cut herself. I don't know if a goo worm was placed there. When I talked to her, I saw that she was very quick-witted. I think this person is the second type, a substitute. Your Miaojiang has so many twists and turns. Jing Yu frowned fiercely. She didn't know why, but she suddenly felt that Miaojiang was very scary. Of course. Feng Yu proudly raised her chin and said, but don't be too scary. There are many people who raise voodoo in Miaojiang, but not many people are proficient. Most people can put voodoo, but ordinary doctors can save them. Only a small number of people have the ability and talent to raise voodoo. You have to know that it takes a long time to raise a voodoo. Because it can die at any time, I haven't raised a single voodoo since I was born. When Feng Yu said this, she suddenly had a look of indignation. Chapter 1838. That's good. Jing Yu heaved a sigh of relief. If it was so easy to raise goo, Miaojiang wouldn't be holed up in such a small place. Oh right, I met someone on the street. While Feng Yu was speaking, 15th interrogation officer walked over quickly. Madam, Yun Tian brought his wife and child to see you. 15th interrogation officer bowed slightly to Jing Yu. Yun Tian. Why is Yun Tian here? Jing Yu was stunned. This is the person I wanted to talk to. Feng Yu blinked and said, he seemed to have seen a few corpses outside the city. They were poisoned to death. I felt that you needed to know something from him, so I asked him to come. Jing Yu looked at Feng Yu in surprise. She smiled and said, looks like I need to look at you differently. I thought you were just a child. Now I see that you know what's important and what's important. Other than your wild nature, you're not bad. Jing Yu praised. Of course, don't you know who I am? Feng Yu raised her chin proudly. Her eyes were filled with joy. Jing Yu looked at Feng Yu and shook her head helplessly. She really needed to change her personality. She was used to being wild in the pugilistic world. Look at her, she didn't know whether to laugh or cry. No wonder she had a conflict with Xiao Bai. Jing Yu smiled. She tidied up and walked towards the main hall. She heard from Yin Xiao that Xiao Bai had already gone to receive Xiao Chen. Xiao Bai was like the master of the house, going out to receive him. Jing Yu was very satisfied. The front hall was bustling. When Jing Yu arrived, she saw Xiao Bai talking to Yun Tian. Jing Yu's stomach was getting bigger day by day. It was even more obvious in these few months. When she walked over, although she was wearing loose clothes to cover it, it was still obvious. Young Master Yun, long time no see. Jing Yu raised her eyebrows slightly, a faint smile in her eyes. She turned to look at Yun Tian and in Yuqing and nodded slightly, her eyes full of courtesy. 9th Imperial Concubine. Yun Tian also bowed slightly towards Jing Yu. Beside him, Yun very politely called her madam. Have a seat. Jing Yu raised her hand slightly and said, Yin Xiao, prepare the tea. After the warm tea moistened her mouth, Jing Yu looked at Yun Tian in surprise and asked, Young Master Yun, why did you come to the Imperial City? I'm just passing by. When Yun Tian interacted with Jing Yu, he had a subtle feeling. He pursed his lips and said, the Imperial City doesn't seem to be peaceful. I'm just here to say a few words. What words? Let's hear it. Jing Yu nodded seriously and looked at Yun Tian. I don't know who you've provoked, but when I entered the city, I found something outside the Imperial City. I think you'd like to know about it. Let's hear it. Jing Yu nodded firmly and looked at Yun Tian. I found a few corpses. Yun Tian pursed his lips and said, I don't know what your attitude is, but those corpses looked like they were poisoned. Based on the grudge between us, I'm afraid you'll link it to me. So I have no choice but to say it now. Yun Tian pursed his lips and said, my poison sex people have already dispersed. No one is targeting you anymore. Those poison people weren't poisoned by my poison sect. I hope you can investigate clearly. Chapter 1839. What proof do you have that the culprit isn't a member of your poison sect? Jing Yu looked at Yun Tian seriously and said, You should know that the people outside know that although the poison sect has scattered, its reputation is still there. If you want to say that the culprit isn't a member of your poison sect, that mouth of yours won't be able to prove it. Jing Yu looked at Yun Tian calmly. Since your poison sect was once famous, you naturally have the ability to do so. What do you want? Yun Tian immediately frowned when he heard this. There was some displeasure in his eyes. Don't get angry. Jing Yu pursed her lips seriously. I just want to take a good look at the person you said was poisoned to death. Jing Yu narrowed her eyes. What do you want to do? Yun Tian's eyes were wary. I won't hide it from you, but people from Miaojiang have entered the capital. Moreover, it looks like they're targeting me. Jing Yu pursed her lips. I just want to know the difference between Miaojiang's goo poison and your poison sects. If we can't find proof that the culprit isn't a member of your poison sect, I'm afraid that young Master Yun will have to suffer for a while. Jing Yu said calmly. After all, many things have happened between us. I can't help but think of this. Yun Tian's face darkened. Looks like I've become a business that's delivered itself to your doorstep. Young Master Yun must be joking. Jing Yu arched her brows. If she could use Yun Tian well, he'd be a good helper. Mother, young Master Yun doesn't have a place to stay in the capital. Why don't you stay in our manor? Xiao Bai finally spoke up. That'll make it easier for us to work together. Yun Tian, what do you think? Jing Yu kept calling Yun Tian young master. It was too strange, so she calmly said it. I don't have any objections. Yun Tian glanced at An Yuqing and Yun Yun, then nodded calmly. He didn't think that such a large manor wouldn't be able to accommodate the three of them. Naturally, he agreed. The inner courtyard was bustling with activity. There had never been so many people living in the manor before. Jing Yu was pregnant and had Yin Xiao arrange a place to stay. Xing Yi, Xing Shiwu, and the others took care of things. Xiao Bai had nothing to do, so he brought Yun Tian and the others out to play. After familiarizing themselves with the mansion, Yun Tian and An Yuqing went to rest after walking for a while. Yun Yun, on the other hand, was filled with excitement as she looked left and right. Brother Xiao Bai, is this your home? After Yun Tian left, Yun Yun immediately relaxed. She happily looked at the bricks and tiles of the houses around her. Her eyes were filled with amazement as she said, "This is the first time I've seen such a beautiful house." Do you like it? Xiao Bai followed behind Yun Yun. Looking at Yun Yun's naive and surprised look, Xiao Bai felt very comfortable when she called him Big Brother Xiao Bai. They were obviously of similar age, but why was there such a huge difference between Feng Yu and Yun Yun? Xiao Bai sneered in disdain as he thought about it. He followed behind Yun Yun and introduced her to the roads and directions of the prince's mansion. This stone looks like a rooster. Yun Yun's happy voice sounded. Chapter 1840. Why don't I see any resemblance? Xiao Bai looked at the rock that Yun Yun was pointing at and immediately frowned. His eyes were filled with confusion as he spoke. Feng Yu was just about to walk back to her room when she heard these voices when she was passing by. It was really frightening to suddenly hear a little girl's voice. However, after pausing for a moment and hearing Xiao Bai's words, she was immediately stunned. Why was Xiao Bai here? And who was he talking to? Feng Yu's face was filled with confusion. She took a step forward and slowly looked over. She saw the two people standing by the rock pond. Xiao Bai was dressed in black, and the little girl was dressed in light pink. Her small face was filled with a faint smile. Brother Xiao Bai, look. This is the head and this is the tail. Doesn't it look like a rooster? Yun Yun's eyes were filled with smiles as she stepped forward and pointed at the rock on the rock. Xiao Bai suddenly burst into laughter after hearing Yun Yun's words. Yun Yun was about to continue speaking when she saw Feng Yu standing not far away. She immediately cried out in surprise. Feng Yu originally didn't want to speak, but since they were already seen, it wouldn't be appropriate for her to continue hiding, right? Xiao Bai also turned his head to look. When he saw Feng Yu, his brows furrowed slightly. Then, the smile on his face faded a little. He asked very calmly, "Why are you here?" "Sorry to disturb you." Feng Yu's eyes scanned the two of them, and her gaze landed on Yun Yun. She could easily guess the identity of this person. She hadn't seen this little girl for some time, but she had met her 3 times today. The first time was when she accidentally bumped into her on the street. The second time was in the restaurant. The third time was here. How could Feng Yu not know this person's identity? This must be young Master Yun's daughter? Feng Yu raised her chin arrogantly. It was clearly a greeting, but when it came out of Feng Yu's mouth, it suddenly became a very strange and disdainful expression. Feng Yu, what are you trying to do? Xiaobai couldn't stand Feng Yu's behavior the most. He immediately took a step forward with a displeased expression and stood in front of Yun Yun. He looked at Feng Yu with eyes full of warning. Feng Yu was stunned when she saw Xiaobai's action. Ah. Feng Yu laughed and said casually, "Why are you protecting him so tightly? Do you think I can kill her?" Feng Yu. The moment Feng Yu finished speaking, Xiaobai immediately looked at Feng Yu with a face full of anger. When Feng Yu saw Xiaobai's appearance, all the thoughts that had risen in her heart immediately dissipated. The smile on her face stiffened bit by bit. She is Yun Tian's daughter. People of the Dark Yin sect are not stupid enough to provoke Yun Tian. Why do you have to do this? Feng Yu turned around and said, "Besides, if we really fight, I really don't dare to underestimate the poison sect's poison." Feng Yu's words were spoken casually. Without waiting for Xiaobai's response, she turned around and left. Xiaobai watched Feng Yu leave and slowly frowned. He turned his head and looked at Yun Yun behind him. Yun Yun stood behind Xiaobai and looked in the direction Feng Yu left. She immediately frowned and asked uneasily, "Did I do something wrong?" You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.